of this craft is called an animal in a cage.
Hapa tulipo jamani, tuna huzuni moyoni. Tukitoka jukwani, tunaenda mazishini.
Kameshika kangoma kameshika, kameshika kangoma kameshika, kameshika kangoma kameshika, kameshika.
Hello, it's the 1st of February and well, January has just ended like that. Good morning and thank you for choosing to start today with us here on Good Morning Kenya. My name is Marie Yambo. Coming up in the news, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission arrests 7 officials from the Nakuru County overgraft allegation amounting to about 7.9 billion shillings. And that is retired President Uhuru Kenyatta also calls a bluff as claims by a section of Kenya Kwanza leaders that he funded the Jacaranda and Kamukunji rallies for the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance faction. Details will be coming in our news this morning, and also this morning we expect the Senate Speaker, that is Amason Kingi, to preside over a Commonwealth Parliamentary Association meeting. Details will be coming your way in our subsequent bulletins, but first things first, my colleagues are in the studio, that is Doreen, Ram and Victor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Doreen was talking about something of, is it a coincidence? It's,
yes.
Telepathy.
Perfect.
Telepathy.
Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect.
Perfect telepathy.
Perfecto.
It's the first day of February. January is over.
Oh, yeah.
January is over. And we thank God for that. Welcome to the program. My name is Victor Lo. We have got plenty in store for you. Today on The Viewpoint, we'll be talking about mediation as an alternative dispute resolution. We have got a lawyer from our country. That is Mwinde Siokau, who is a lawyer. And also, we also have Wilfred Mutubwa, who is an advocate of the High Court and chairman of CIARB Kenya. As well as we want to look at the Kenyan foreign policy post-election. We have got former ambassador, that is Ngovi Gitau, who is former ambassador of Kenya to South Korea, and the EU ambassador Henriette Ijija. So we have got a good show for you. You just have to stay there until the end of the show. Talk to us on our social media handles. My name is Victor. Welcome to the program. Doreen.
Yeah, exactly. And also we look at the state of education in the country. Just where are we as far as digital learning is concerned? What are these loopholes that exist? How do we bridge the gap? And also the education reforms currently ongoing in the country. The KBC, and as of yesterday, in some parts of the country, public schools, to be very specific, learning hadn't resumed, and this was due to delayed deployment of teachers. So where are we as far as that is concerned? Just how do we look into this new curriculum? I'll be speaking to Professor Alice Njuguna, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Zitech University. She'll be talking to us about that and so much more as far as education is concerned in our country. Good morning and welcome on board.
And remember, we are coming to you live from the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation here in Nairobi, Kenya, the very first day of February 2023. Thank you so much for sticking with us right here on KBC Channel 1. As Victor, Marie and Doreen have just said, we have a lot in store for you on this fine Wednesday morning. My name is Ram Maguko, but before we go to all of these things, I hand you over to Marie Yambo for the news updates.
Indeed, thank you for joining us this morning. The Cabinet has approved the first Kenya Kwanza administration supplementary budget that will effectively reduce Kenya's budgetary deficit by 300 billion shillings. The supplementary budget also aligns the administration priorities with the 2022-2023 financial year's budget. The Cabinet meeting, chaired by President William Ruto, was the first paperless Cabinet meeting kicking off a major government digitization drive. Details coming up.
Cabinet secretaries stand up for their routine Tuesday meetings with the head of state, carrying bulky folders, large briefcases and huge files. Tuesday, 31st of January 2023, marked a new dawn. In the cabinet meeting room, they found secured portable digital services interconnected and attached to their files, memos and a secure notebook to assist them take notes. The move is expected to significantly reduce the cost of printing and enhance security of cabinet records. President William Ruto says the digitization of cabinet meetings is an indication of government embracing technology.
The process of digitization of all government services is going to be part and parcel of the processes of the government of Kenya and part of the delivery of this administration. So I want to congratulate CS Owalo and team.
So far, the government has digitized 1,200 services of the expected 5,000. At the same time, the cabinet has approved the 2022-2023 supplementary budget. It is the first by the Ruto administration and will see a budgetary cut of 300 billion shillings. A move that will see government introduce several austerity measures to align the budget with key priorities of a Kenya Kwanza administration. The cabinet further called for closer collaboration between the national government and county governments, development partners and the private sector as it seeks to scale up efforts to feed vulnerable families affected by the ongoing drought in parts of the country.
Retired President Uhuru Kenyatta has dismissed claims by a section of leaders from the William Ruto administration that he funded the Azimio Kamukunji and Jacaranda rallies in Nairobi. The former head of state, who spoke when he condoled the late Professor Magoha's family at his Nairobi home in Lavington, instead urged the leaders to focus on service delivery.
Kenya's former head of state Uhuru Kenyatta was at Lavington to condole the former CS of education, George Magoha's widow and the family.
I think this country has lost not only a great soldier, a great soul, a committed man, but it has also lost a sincere individual.
Here, the former president took the opportunity to hit at the Kenya Kwanza government for trailing attacks on him.
People may say whatever they want to say. Hiyo ni wataongea, utaona watarudi tu hapo hapo. Hoja wacha wapatiwe nafasi wapige mgumzo. There are people who talk a lot about what they will do and do nothing. But there are people who will talk very little but do a lot and their deeds are seen.
Kenyatta hailed the fallen CS as a servant of people, saying his nature did not bother him when he rattled so long as he spoke his truth.
When Professor Magoha stepped in the room, you knew a leader had arrived. When there was an argument, you predicted Professor Magoha's side, even before the argument began. The side would be where the facts are, where the truth is. That is Magoha's side.
His visit was seen as a reunion of his former cabinet and PSS who served in the former administration, hailing Magoha as an instrumental in transforming the Ministry of Education.
When I made him a minister, I made the right choice in putting at the helm of education a man who deserved that position, and from there continued to do what he did.
Professor Magoha was the turbo engine, and my colleagues can bear me out. Professor is the one who charged the room. Every time we were in the room, he's the one who supplied the energy.
The former president assured the bereaved family of his unwavering support as they prepare to give the fallen academic giant a befitting send-off.
With us, you have a family, because we were a family. And we will continue to stand with you. And whatever it is that you may require of us, you can count on us.
He always said family came first. He believed in family. From the first day, he said, if I'm up and my family is down, then I'm down.
Let those of us
who are still alive emulate George by carrying on the good work he had done for the country and for mankind in general.
If there is anything we can do in this world as a tribute to Professor Magoha, in our small way, wherever life takes us, wherever life finds us, we just try to emulate that thing. Honest, sincere delivery of service to the people.
The former education CS who died suddenly on Tuesday, January 24th at the Nairobi hospital will be buried on Saturday the 11th at his rural home in Siaya.
A section of Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance politicians led by Nairobi County Assembly Majority Leader, that is Peter Imwatok, has dared the state to arrest their leaders, that is Raila Odinga, Martha Karua, Kalonzo Musyoka, among others, and stop going after what they term as the small fish. The leaders met the statement after Korogosho member of County Assembly, that is Absalom Odhiambo, was presented at the Milimani Law Courts by the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, which is seeking to detain him for 7 days pending investigations.
Former Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission Chairperson Nofula Chebukati has responded to claims of a meeting between him and Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance leader Raila Odinga before the presidential election results announcement. Chebukati now wants the video of the alleged visit to Raila's house, where he was allegedly accompanied by former commissioners Professor Abdigulie and Boyamolu, provided within 7 days. Through his lawyer Steve Ogola, Chebukati is threatening to sue the former Prime Minister, saying the allegations have the effect of lowering his dignity and injuring his reputation among the right-minded society. Meanwhile, a section of Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance politicians led by Nairobi County Assembly Majority Leader Peter Imwatok has dared the state to arrest their party leaders Raila Odinga, Martha Karua, Kalonzo Musyoka, among others, and stop going after what they term as the small fish.
Kindly, we ask the state actors to arrest one called Raila Amolo Odinga. That's what we are daring them. Stop arresting small fish. We have our father called Raila Amolo Odinga. Arrest him. Together with Martha Karua, arrest her. Together with Kalonzo Musyoka, arrest him. Together with Oparanya, arrest him. And then we see how it plays out.
The leaders made the statement after Korogocho member of County Assembly Absalom Odhiambo was presented at the Milimani Law Courts. The Directorate of Criminal Investigations has filed a miscellaneous application seeking to detain him for 7 days on grounds of incitement to violence and violation of the law. Odhiambo, through his lawyers, opposed the application, terming it political.
However, what you've not been informed is that he was arrested at the NCIC building while he was honoring a summon. We do not have a holding charge to suggest why in the first place the respondent continues to be detained.
I happened to defend 5 cabinet ministers right now who are charged of similar offenses. Cabinet Secretary Moses Kuria was here over the same allegations. He graduated out of this dock to be a CS. Cabinet Secretary Aisha Jumwa was here, the Pangani 6. She graduated to be there. And many more. You are being used on the question of politics.
The defense further urged the court to be independent and fair. Magistrate Gilbert Shikwe will deliver a ruling on Wednesday, the 1st of February 2023. Odhiambo was arrested on Monday, the 30th of January 2023, following remarks he made during Sunday's Azimio rally at Jacaranda grounds in Nairobi.
Now, 4 people, among them 2 pupils, have been injured following attacks at the Nakuse and Lokwar areas in Turkana South. A number of houses and a school were torched by attackers allegedly from a neighboring community. The incident comes a few days after Interior Cabinet Secretary Professor Kithure Kindiki toured the region. Turkana County Commissioner, that is Jacob Ouma, has assured the residents of enhanced protection, saying more security officers have been deployed to the area to deal with the criminal elements.
Zizi hatujui penye tunaenda. Na hawa watu wenye wanabeba mizigo hawa, watuelewi wanaenda wapi.
Mimi nataka niame nitoke. Niende kwa sababu hana hatia yeyote ile ambaye nitaweza pale. Kuchikilia pale kwa sababu wameshachoma.
Hawa wamepigwa risasi. Huyu amepigwa risasi. Na karibu hata kuawa. Ni Mungu tu ndiye amewasaidia.
Now to the corridors of justice, where 7 current and former Nakuru County officials have been arrested over the irregular awarding of a 7.9 million shillings tender for the construction of Karatina Market. Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission says 3 more suspects were being pursued in relation to the allegations. The 7 include the daughter of former Member of Parliament for Bahati, that is Kimani Nganjiri, Edith Wanjiru, who served as a Chief Officer for Trade, Industrialization and Tourism under former Governor Lee Kinyanjui's administration. Those still employed by the county include procurement officers, that is Jackson Maingi and Anne Njeri, accountant Nixon Kibet, and tourism officer Florence Karanja, who worked under the Trade Department. The ACC also arrested Edith Wangari and Jane Njoki, who are directors of Levy Contractors. The company awarded the tender. EACC South Rift Regional Director Ignatius Wekesa stated that the contractor was not registered with the National Construction Authority, the NCA, and failed to avail a valid tax compliance certificate, with investigations revealing that his certificate had expired before the tendering process.
We forwarded the file to DPP with recommendations to charge various officers of the county government, especially Minister of Trade, and the contractors who are awarded the tender, namely Levy Contractors Limited. And today we have managed to arrest 7 of them. And I'm also warning the contractors, these so-called proof case contractors who don't have the requisite documentation to enable them and capacity to enable them to perform jobs, and yet they are all over trying to bid for contracts which they are very much aware that they cannot deliver.
The Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union has issued a 60-day ultimatum for the government to implement the 2017 collective bargaining agreement led by their Secretary General, Dr. Davji Atela. The union says they are resuscitating their initial decision to call the industrial action due to challenges facing healthcare providers.
Solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong.
Poor remuneration, disparity in doctor-to-patient ratios, unemployment, long working hours, and poor working conditions are some of the challenges which caregivers in the country go through.
Because you can't have a country where every month we have to go to the streets to get our salaries. I know counties where people are not paid for 2 months, where you have loan deductions on your pay slip and they don't remit to the banks. In CRB, doctors are like the highest number of civil servants. You don't have a medical cover.
This state has reportedly sunk some health caregivers into depression and poverty.
In a suicide note, he wrote to the sister. Dr. Mogi described his desperations not being able to find employment and the sorrows of watching his poor family struggle months after completing his internship.
The recent case being reported from Kangundo constituency, Machakos County, where a graduate doctor took his own life on 23rd of January 2023.
Daktari represents the hundreds of our bright brothers and sisters who, after toiling for years training to be medics, have found themselves either unemployed or underemployed or working under precarious contracts.
that don't offer them any protection.
The Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentist Union, KMPDU, is faulting county governments for breaching their Public Service Commission employment terms.
Employ doctors, give doctors space to have discussions, remunerate doctors on time, promote doctors, and they need to be promoted just like all workers.
If some of the issues you're not raising here will not be implemented, we'll shut down. Exactly. We'd rather stay home with our colleagues than pretend that we are working and we are just watching patients die.
The KMPDU now says that most of its members are faced by a myriad of challenges which are contained in the 2017 collective bargaining agreement. It is for this reason that they have given the government a 60-day grace period to honor that CBA, failure to which they will put down their tools on 5th of March 2023.
Thank you, Parsaya, for that report. Now, let's shift gears to business news, where Central Bank of Kenya Governor Dr. Patrick Njoroge is optimistic the dollar inflows from World Bank and the IMF will lift Kenya's forex reserves above the recommended level of 4 months import cover. Since November last year, the forex reserves at the central bank have been lower than the recommended 4 months of import cover.
There have been concerns about the stock of forex at the central bank. A statement from the Monetary Policy Committee yesterday indicated that Kenya's forex reserves had deteriorated for the second time in a row and was below the recommended 4 months of import cover. The central bank currently has $7.005 billion in forex reserves, which is 3.92 months of import cover, down from $7.038 billion, representing 3.94 months of import cover in November last year. However, central bank governor says there's no cause for alarm yet.
We don't have any concerns there. We do expect that the cover will increase, and the reserves that we are holding remain adequate.
He says Kenya is expecting dollar inflows, which will lift the import cover above the recommended 4-month cover.
We also are looking at it looking forward, which is expected inflows that will be coming, and we have this programmed in our into the future. World Bank, there's amounts like 400 million US. The IMF will be coming again for a review, and once that review is completed, long before end June, we expect 300 million US, the equivalent of that, and also other external loans that have been discussed.
He projects the economy to expand 5.6% this year, supported by the services sector and recovery in the agriculture sector that had 2 bad years, with good rains and distribution of subsidized fertilizer.
It will decline by 0.3%, so minus 0. Our agriculture has therefore being sagging, and we do expect that there will be a rebound if we have normal conditions. So we are not hoping for floods and things like that, but having normal rainfall conditions in 2023, particularly the long rains.
Rice and sugar for 6 months will ease shortages, avert a food crisis, and reduce pressure on commodity prices.
Maize, what has been gazetted, is like 27% of annual consumption, and rice is about 39% of annual consumption, and sugar is about 13% of annual consumption. So I'm making the point that this will actually have will assert a downward pressure on prices, but more generally on food inflation.
The Observers, a network of 5,000.
Now, the government is inviting investors to lease 4,000 acres in special economic zones with priority given to local investors. The Ministry of Trade has so far opened up 3,000 acres in Dangokundu and 1,000 acres in the Naivasha Special Economic Zone in a bid to boost export by 20% in the next 2 years.
Exports currently account for 10% of the gross domestic product, while manufacturing makes up for only 7%. The Ministry of Trade plans to boost these numbers to 30% and 20% by 2025 and 2030 respectively. The Ministry of Investments, Trade and Industry has narrowed down on various strategic sectors in the 2 special economic zones for investors, with plans underway to kick off the Dongo Kundu Special Economic Zone by July this year. The leasing openings announced will focus on agro-processing, pharmaceuticals, the textile industry, green energy, and steel, among many others. This comes as the Trade Cabinet Secretary, Moses Kuria, has expressed the need to revitalize authorities that are responsible for oversighting export trade, with shake-ups expected at the Kenya Export Promotion and Branding Agency.
Well, I look at, that's where we end the business news, but just a sneak peek at what happened in the sports world, where Manchester United complete the loan signing of Bayern Munich midfielder, that is Marcel Batiza, on a deal until the end of the season, as the Red Devils act quickly after Christian Eriksen was ruled out for 3 months with an ankle injury. And Chelsea have sensationally signed Enzo Fernandez for a British record 107 million euros after agreeing a deal with Benfica late on deadline day. And West Brom complete signing of Leicester winger, that is Mark Abrington, on loan until the end of the season, leaving Jamie Vardy and the only player left at the King Power from the 2016 title winning squad. Southampton complete deadline day double swoop for Rennes winger, that is Kamaldeen Suleimana, and Gen striker, that is Paul Onachu, with Saints bringing in the pair for more than 40 million euros as they aim to battle their way away from the foot of the Premier League. Leicester City signed a 6-foot-inch defender, that is Harry Squatter, from Stoke City for 15 million euros in closing stages of deadline day, as the centre-back becomes the most expensive Australian player ever. Well, details will be coming your way later on in our bulletins. I beg your pardon, but right now I want to hand it over to Victor Ulo, who will be bringing you more in the Good Morning Kenya, and also a review of the newspapers. So we'll be coming back shortly.
All right, so Marie, thank you so much, and we are taking a very short break, but when we come back, already we have got Ngovi Gitau in studio, who is a former ambassador of Kenya to South Korea. We have to talk about Kenyan foreign policy after election. That and much more coming shortly after this break.
Vivian, actually, Mr. Bai.
No worries. I got this.
Print these documents and get them to Mr. Bai. I have an interview.
Why don't you do it yourself?
Also,
Yes?
yesterday afternoon, let's just put that behind us.
It's like he's a totally different person today.
Are you dumb or what?
What?
Will you do everything they say? Have you eaten yet?
No, I'm not that hungry. I'm managing.
As the head editor here, I personally invite you.
Okay.
He said yes.
Yeah.
He's going? Okay!
It's the DFB Pokals round of 16. Mainz against Bayern.
Musiala, he's dug it out beautifully.
And we see the back in. Alexander Herk. One Bundesliga side has to go out. Mainz have never reached the final. Bayern have been there more than any other side.
And Kimmich! A crisp finish.
Only one side can go through. It's going to be a tough fight.
Sauti ya Kenya
92.9. Hii ni KBC Radio Taifa.
Kila kitu maishani kina sauti yaleta furaha.
Radio.
Sauti ya elimisha yahimiza yatuleta pamoja. Sauti ya Kenya
Radio Taifa.
Sauti ya Kenya.
Maisha ya sahaba Abdullah bin Umar radhiallahu anhu, kama tulivyoweza kusikia, ni kuwa yalikuwa ni maisha ya kumpendeza Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Namwomba Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala atuwezeshe sisi kuwa wenye kufuata vielelezo vyema katika jamii na pia mifano mema kama ya Abdullah bin Umar radhiallahu anhu.
Welcome back. Now let's take a look at what's on the front page of the local dailies. First, before we get into our main discussion here, already in studio, as I told you, we have Ngovi Gitau, who is a former ambassador of Kenya to South Korea, already in studio. We want to talk about Kenya's foreign policy as far as this regime is concerned, where we're looking at and where we stand as a nation. But before then, a quick look at the papers. On the front page of the Standard newspaper, politics of tax suck in the mighty. Politics of tax suck in the mighty. Issues of tax have been part of Kenya's political discourse since independence, and if it is not the incumbent president exhorting Kenyans to pay their fair share, it has been politicians crying foul over weaponization of the instrument by KRA to silence critics. Now it is the country's big three fighting it out. That was also the front page of the Standard here. Uhuru Jayab at Kenya Kwanza. We talk less, but we performed. He was speaking yesterday during the when he visited the late Professor Magoha's family. Junior secondary kicks off amid anxiety, on the front page of the Standard. Very quickly, what do we have on the People Daily here? Uhuru defends Jubilee record. Retired president hits out at current leadership and noisemakers, quote unquote, for constantly finding fault with his legacy, including CBC. Digital first as Ruto cabinet holds paperless meeting. That happened yesterday at State House in Nairobi. Raila Chebukati locked in fresh row. Former IEBC chairman Wafula Chebukati demands that Azimio leader proves graft allegations against him as Raila calls for a return to manual voting system. And on the Daily Nation, were the 15 billion shillings graft tax cases hotter? Were the 15 billion shillings graft tax cases hotter? We have got a number of people who were accused, and so far their cases so far have been dropped, starting from the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. We have got Miriam Boy, Purity, and Palmer Holdings, etc., etc. You can take a look at that story. Still on the front page here, focus on service delivery. Uhuru tells Ruto as Simon Magoha. That is on the front page here. Chebukati to Raila, produce video or I'll sue you. Chebukati was speaking through his lawyers. And finally, on the Star newspaper, Ruto allies demand tax audit of Kenyatta farms. Ruto allies demand tax audit of Kenyatta farms. Brookside, NCBA Bank, NK and Safaricom 5G deal among those they want scrutinized. Former president laughs off Onslaught says adversaries are idlers, again on the front page. That is what's here. Ruto's grand plan to build 263 dams, revive Aror and Kimorer. You can take a look at your favorite local daily for this and more of other story. All right, so get in straight into it. I have in studio Ambassador Ngovi Gitau, who is the first ambassador of Kenya to South Korea already. In studio with me here. We want to talk about Kenya's foreign policy as far as we are as a nation in the new dispensation here in the country. Abalozi, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Victor.
The last time we were here was way back during President Mwai Kibaki's
that's the last time I was here.
Yes.
And we had a very good and useful conversation.
How have you been? So far, so good. How have you been?
I've been fine. It's a new year.
Yes.
Both the Gregorian and the lunar new year.
Right.
Which started last Sunday.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have a new administration in place. Where do we look at as a nation in terms of our foreign policy?
Well, Kenya's foreign policy has been articulated very well. And we are among the few countries in Africa with more than 50 missions globally. So in that aspect, we are doing well. But what I would like to start with is to give a statement. And this is what I have. That it is important for all Kenyans to realize that for Kenya to engage in effective, consistent, coherent, and constructive dialogue with other countries and international organizations, it is very important for us to have a comprehensive foreign relations policy. And I think that is what I would like to elaborate on, and depending on what you have on your schedule.
We have a new dispensation.
Yeah.
And based on that, Africa or Kenya has a new Foreign Policy Act.
Yeah.
That means that we have to abide by that.
Yes.
How is the new administration going to distinguish between the previous and the current dispensation?
You see, foreign policy has no previous or current because it's a long-term process which requires sustained effort and commitment. And we have to have that commitment as a country, irrespective of which regime is in power. So, what I think the focus should be for Kenya right now is to decide on which interests we want to focus on.
Yes.
There are three normative interests in foreign affairs, in foreign relations. One is political interests. Two is national interests, and three is commercial interests. If you look at the way the world is structured right now, America has pursued national interests since the Second World War. China is focusing more on political interests. They want Africa to support them at the UN level, at multilateral level. But then we have countries like Korea, whose focus on commercial interests. I think Kenya should focus more on our commercial interests, economic diplomacy, and promotion of trade. I think that is the best way for Kenya to go forward. And in that area, then that will require dialogue and engagement with other countries, and especially in areas of integration, like the way we are doing in the African Union.
Yes.
If you look at the Agenda 2063, Kenya should really support that agenda so that we can expand our markets, we can expand our reach, and then we are able to propel our economic growth forward.
Yes. President Ruto's policy is Africa-focused, based kind of policy.
Yeah.
That does affect the global policy?
No, you see, it does not affect the global policy because that's multilateral diplomacy, isn't it?
Yes.
So we have the United Nations, whose focus is on proactively maintaining peace and stability globally. But then we have the African Union, whose focus is protecting Africa's sovereignty. And I don't think there's any conflict. And Ruto's focus on Africa is very important for Kenya, and especially when we look at trade and where Kenya is going. We need to develop a larger market, and that's why we have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement.
Yes.
That is so important to us because when we try to reach those markets out there in Europe, there are so many non-tariff barriers as compared to the African market. So I think the focus on the African continent is the right way to go.
And why Africa focused?
You see, Africa is a constellation of many nations, and we are coming from the same subframe. It's easier for us to understand one another. Let's compare that with our entry into Asia or into Europe, and you will see the difference very clearly. You find that when you go to Singapore, to Korea, the culture is different. The thinking is different. But when I go to Uganda or to Tanzania or to Ghana, there is a commonality in our values, in our culture, and it is easier to deal with those people than the outside world.
Ambassador, currently Kenya is led by former President Uhuru Kenyatta, is mediating the peace process in Congo. That shows that Kenya is a big boy in Africa, if not in East and Central Africa. Are we likely to strengthen these kind of bonds that we have with other nations, and why Kenya?
Yeah, the answer is yes. That is coming from the background that we've served our term as a non-permanent member in the UN Security Council. And that gave us two achievements. Number one, as a country, Kenya was given a platform to actively participate in addressing global security challenges, which was very, very important for Kenya. That's an achievement we did. Secondly, as a non-permanent member of the Security Council, that raised our profile and international standing as a key player in regional and international security matters. So I see that continuing.
After election, we went through an election which again went to the Supreme Court. How does it portray Kenya globally?
Now, that is a political question. You see?
Yes.
Let us talk about Kenya's image internationally.
Right.
That needs to be managed, and I feel that that is where a comprehensive strategy is required. Our image globally and relatively to our neighbors, Kenya is seen as a relatively stable and peaceful country. And that image needs to be sustained. And our participation in DRC, in Sudan, confirms that we have the capacity and the capability to lead in peace and security in this region. So the elections, despite what happened, keep in mind that we have had instances of political violence in the past, but I don't see that recurring again, because we have learned a lot from that. Because you realize that we moved so far from a single party system to multi-party to what now is perceived as negotiated democracy.
Yes.
And I think that will help a lot to remove that tainted image in the international community. I would like to add that a lot of that has to do with the way we manage our media. And I feel that when we get to this discussion deeper, I would like us to have an initiative on how the media can be brought on board, and especially through foreign affairs, to articulate what is positive about Kenya. Because our media, on average, reports disasters. And I think that's where you are coming from about the post-election issues, which I don't think globally are issues.
President William Ruto has visited South Korea. You were the first ambassador of South Korea during your time. South Korea stands at a very pivotal point in terms of their trade strength and even politically speaking. Why South Korea and not any other country? The last regime was so much leaned towards China.
There's a lot going on between South Korea and Kenya, and a lot has been going on since we formed our diplomatic relations way back, I think it was 27th of February 1964, during the then President Jomo Kenyatta and President Park Chung-hee. And although that relationship did not mature to what we expected, I think right now it's in that direction. And I'll give you an example of the last visit.
Yes.
When President Ruto went to Korea recently, we had a basic agreement, bilateral agreement, where we had a credit line of about $200 million, and that was for the period 2018 to 2020. And that agreement lapsed, and there was no follow-up. But when he went to South Korea, that agreement was revived, and it was enhanced $1 billion credit line for the period 2023 to 2026, I think. Yeah, so it's looking good.
Yes. And after the election, I mean, the African Union and the EU remained guarded, you know, after the election, which again went to the Supreme Court, and now here we are. Why?
Rephrase that.
The African Union and the EU have remained guarded after the post-election that went to the Supreme Court, and now we have a new regime. Why do you think the two entities remained guarded?
Why are they guarded?
Yes.
I don't think they are. What is your concern here?
Why have they not commented even on the post-election, the processes that Kenya went through?
You see, these are multilateral agencies.
Yes.
And they don't interfere with internal affairs of other countries unless they see a serious threat in security and peace and stability. And I don't think the Kenyan situation went to that extent. They might be quiet because it's too early to comment. There are still a lot of issues going on. There are a lot of negotiations. There are a lot of discussions. And I think it's prudent to wait until the government has settled down. Yeah.
Kenya enjoyed some sense of, you know, of membership in the African UN Security Council.
Yeah.
We enjoyed that.
Yeah, we did.
What does it take?
Sorry?
What does it take?
Well, we were elected. And of course, you are aware that Africa gets some 3 slots in the non-permanent members. And in the last term, Kenya was one of them. And now we have another 3 countries, Gabon, I think, Ghana, and Mozambique. But I said earlier on that that was a very big achievement for Kenya, for giving us that platform to actively participate in addressing global security matters. Yeah, I think it was a very positive thing for Kenya.
And Kenya is considered as a big boy in Africa in terms of security, in terms of conflict resolution. What are we supposed to do as a nation to make sure that we remain to the top in that kind of aspect?
Yeah, I just saw that clip when I was sitting here about Turkana. You were screening it just before I came in, and that shows we still have some fragile regions of Kenya. But I think that problem has been addressed, and it's being addressed. But for Kenya to maintain that status as what you are calling a big boy, there are certain things we need to do. And one of them is intelligence capability. We need to know these things before they happen. We've been caught up unawares with a few instances of terrorism, organized crime, political violence. That should not be happening in Kenya. And I think we need to strengthen our intelligence capability.
Our intelligence capability. We've had Kenyan soldiers together with AMISOM in Somalia for a very long time.
Yeah.
We've had our troops in South Sudan, and right now we have our troops in Congo.
Yeah.
What is the strength of Kenya in terms of conflict resolution?
Kenya is very strong in that area because of long experience. It's been going on for a very, very, very long time, and I think Kenya is one of the few countries in the region who have the capacity to provide troops to these other countries. And that is mainly because of our both economic and national stability.
Yes.
Yes. I don't think we can be compared much in that area.
Let's talk about trade. Ambassador, Kenya exports a lot, and I believe that our tea is one of the best globally.
Yeah.
What do you think that the current regime should do to enhance that and probably keep it at that particular level?
I think our focus right now should be on economic diplomacy and promoting trade and encouraging investments. That is where we have our strength. We've been able to do successful trade in both tea and coffee, in horticulture, but we need to diversify. And for that to happen, we need to strengthen and improve our interagency coordination and cooperation. Because from my experience, that is what is really pulling us down. Because you find that Minister of Foreign Affairs has done so much, and then there is no control tower to coordinate and to harmonize various policies by various MDAs, and then we lose initiative. And I can give you 2 examples on that. The first one was when we signed the bilateral air service agreement between Kenya and South Korea. And we are able to convince Korean Air to offer direct flights to Kenya. But then that was on what we call code sharing without landing rights, meaning that we wanted to protect Kenya Airways. So the flight lands in Nairobi and Kenya Airways takes over from there. It didn't work. And Korean Air asked to withdraw. The second point I want to raise about the interagency and the MDA cooperation is that we were granted market access authorization for bananas and broccoli way back 2018. We haven't shipped even a container up to now, because once the Minister of Foreign Affairs has done that, it goes to another agency. And there is no way Minister of Foreign Affairs can enforce that. So we either restructure, like in some other countries where the international trade export promotion is together with foreign affairs, or we set up a control tower which can harmonize all these MDAs for effective trading.
Yes. Do you think Kenya should seek for more partners in terms of their partnerships in the foreign affairs and foreign policy?
Well, everybody in the world is looking for more friends, and Kenya is not an exception. We must continue building and maintaining strong partnerships with other countries. Yes.
There is a question of, common currency that has been in the pipeline for a very long time, most of the East Africa, for them to use one currency. Do you think this is feasible? It is possible?
If you look at the protocols integrating the East Africa community, we've achieved the custom union and the free markets. And now we are at the stage of common currency and then political federation. The common currency has been postponed several times. I think it should have happened way back either 2013 or 2014. My view is that we should have done the political federation first before the common currency. Because the fear is we do a common currency, I let go my currency, and then the federation doesn't materialize. Then you see there's a problem. And I think that's what's being a real challenge for us. So in my opinion, we should have done the political federation before the common currency. Notwithstanding, it has worked well in Central Africa and parts of West Africa. They have already done their common currency and now they are on political federation. Keep in mind that African Union is integrating Africa through 8 formal economic communities. And the East Africa community is one of them. and each community integrates with another one. I think we are on a tripartite right now between East African Community, COMESA, and SADC. So we are making good progress. Yeah.
And the future looks great for Kenya?
The future for Kenya is very bright. It's very, very bright.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Ambassador, thank you so much.
Yeah.
That is Ambassador Ngovi Gitau, who is the former ambassador of Kenya to South Korea. That is Ngovi Gitau. We are taking a quick break. When we come back, we have got EU ambassador who is already in studio. We want to talk about the EU and so much more as far as Kenya relations is concerned. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
The DFB Pokals round of 16. Mainz against Bayern.
Musiala, he's dug it out beautifully.
Onisiva back in. Alexander Hack. One Bundesliga side has to go out. Mainz have never reached the final. Bayern have been there more than any other side.
And Kimmich! A crisp finish.
Only one side can go through. It's going to be a tough fight.
Really hope they have good reason.
Lakini si walijaribu kukuua.
Telling you Mel, hawa watu ni wa dangerous.
I know.
Na mbona wachi kuwafuatafuata?
They shot my dad, Sitawa.
Mama?
What?
Yeye ndiye anafaa kuwa huko, si wewe.
Ama jamaa wakijua huko. Unataka kuwa umejiingiza kwa noma bure. Na pia mimi utaniingiza kwa ngori.
Nishafika sawa. Sunipeleke kabla wajue niko huko.
I do not care. Do you understand me? Forget about it.
Vivian, actually, Mr. Bai.
No worries. I got this.
Print these documents and get them to Mr. Bai. I have an interview.
Why don't you do it yourself?
Also,
Yes?
yesterday afternoon, let's just put that behind us.
It's like he's a totally different person today.
Are you dumb or what?
What?
Will you do everything they say? Have you eaten yet?
No, I'm not that hungry. I'm managing.
As the head editor here, I personally invite you.
Okay.
He said yes.
Yeah.
He's going? Okay!
All right, welcome back. This is Good Morning Kenya, and thank you so much for staying with us. Already in studio, I have got Ambassador EU, East Africa Union, that is European Union, beg your pardon. Yeah, there you have it. And Red Geiger already in studio. We want to talk about matters Africa, European Union, and Kenya's ties with other foreign relations. We've just had that conversation here with former Ambassador Ngovi Gitau. Ambassador, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Victor.
And welcome to KBC Channel 1.
Thank you. My first time here.
Welcome. You have been in the country for 1 year now. How is Kenya?
It's a beautiful country, and I love the people. I love my job. It's an exciting time to be in Kenya, both for EU-Kenya relations, but also what is happening in Kenya with the new government. the very strong engagement of Kenya in the region and on the international scene. Kenya just had a position in the Security Council and was part of many very important decision-making processes. So Kenya is playing an increasing role in the world. And it's very exciting to be here at this juncture.
Looking at your background, you have been so much involved in different projects across the country. That must be so close to your heart?
Yes. For me, as an ambassador, it's so important to feel that I can make a difference, supporting all the positive things that are going on here in Kenya. So you mentioned already a couple of them.
When you talk about the EU and Kenya, and the international ties, Kenya has enjoyed a lot of relations, and as a member of the European Union, we are still there, and Kenya is rooted. What do you really think that Kenya should do to expand the relationship between these two bodies?
Taking advantage of the opportunities that we have. So I think the sky is the limit to expand our relations, which are already very good. So for a long time, the EU and Kenya have been trusted partners. And last year, we decided to take this to a new level by starting a strategic dialogue between EU and Kenya to bring all our relations together in a comprehensive, high-level dialogue between the President and the EU. So at the EU level, the President of the European Council. And the idea is to talk about politics, to talk about development, but also about business and investment. And you know maybe that the EU is the largest trading partner for Kenya. Sometimes it's not really known, but I just want to cite the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. So the EU in the quarter 1 to 3 of 2022 has been and remained the largest export market, taking 15% of total exports. So it's little known. US has 10, China 3, the UK 5. So of course we are looking at the EU as 27 member states. So if you look at individual countries, it's different. But as a union, EU is and remains the largest trading partner. And revenues increased from 26.8 billion shillings in the third quarter of 21 to 32.3 billion shillings in the third quarter of 22. So these are real important figures that not everybody knows. And we're just now negotiating a new trade agreement to put this on a more stable footing, our trade relations, and further, and further increase our bilateral trade and investment as well.
When you talk about the export, and 15%, that is a big number, even bigger than the biggest economy, that is the United States of America. And we look at the contribution of Kenya into this, we have got a lot of untapped potential in terms of our market base. As European Union, what do you really think that Kenya should do to expand the business tax base, the business base, to contribute to the European Union?
I think one thing that we are looking at is value chains. Because your export is still very much centered on raw materials, so coffee, flowers, whilst you are importing industrial goods, machinery, technology. So by moving up the value chain, Kenya can do so much to have more earnings coming in. And the EU has programs to work on those value chains. And what is more, the EU itself is growing into a green economy now. So we are transiting to a green economy, and Kenya has that same ambition. For example, you're moving towards 100% renewable energy.
Exactly.
Very few countries in the world have that. Kenya should be very, very proud of that. And I know that the government now is trying to go to 100%. You know that the EU has also strongly supported that. We were one of the big investors in the Turkana wind power, in the Ololo geothermal. So, and there we are exactly like-minded, and there is so much potential in green jobs and green growth. And that's why now in February 21 and 22nd, we're having a big EU-Kenya business forum where we bring business together from the two continents. So 250 key businesses from the EU, 250 invited businesses from Kenya. You're in business? Then you should be.
As an entity, we are invited.
We have media also. We're having also signing ceremony, and the president will open it. The CS Trade will be there. So the idea is a business-to-business conference in different areas, but all circling around green transition, green economy, what can be done in that space between the EU and Kenya, but all with businesses. So profits, jobs, growth.
Profits, jobs, growth. Ambassador, we are coming at a point where the world suffered the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and many people suffered, including Kenya. The trade went down. As a European Union, what are you doing to the member states, Kenya included, to support the members and, if possible, to scale the level of partnership and even trade amongst the members?
In the EU, the fact that we have a big internal market of more than 300 million consumers really helped us to cushion the very bad economic downturn we were experiencing. Because global trade basically went down dramatically into free fall.
In fact, most countries are recovering right now.
So the EU was shielded from the worst effects by falling back on its big internal market. So we're trading within the EU with each other. Now Kenya has exactly those ambitions for the East African community. And of all the regional blocs, the East African community has made the greatest strides for integration. So the EU is strongly supporting that, because we feel it worked for us, having a single currency, a single market, and I see that the ambition of Kenya is to drive that process. Now DRC has been admitted, you're negotiating with Somalia, so I think there is an incredible potential, because getting together makes the individual economies much stronger and more resilient. So in the future, by growing that internal trade within East Africa and even the free trade agreement of the whole of Africa, we think that Africa will grow exponentially, and also East Africa. And we know that Kenya is the driving force economically in the East African region. That's why we're boosting so much Kenya as a stable rock in a pretty unstable region. But also doing things inside Kenya to boost economic prosperity, jobs and growth, but also having that sort of regional frame that will help you to regain that stability.
Right. We have just come from an election, and East Africa, the European Union was part and parcel of that process. You met the electoral agency. You met, different contestants. Some of them were the front runners. What is your take on the last general election as the European Union?
I'm so proud that the EU could support the democratic process in Kenya. And of course, there's a lot of criticism because you can always do better. And also Kenya could still do better. And I'm sure that in 2027, it will even be better. But overall, our electoral observer mission was concluding that it has been a very good election. So this is what came out in the findings, and all the other observer missions have come with similar findings, even though they have not yet released their final report. So I was so satisfied and happy to see the performance of the citizens, because they showed such a maturity in their democratic behavior. And all in all, one could say that the last election showed that democracy in Kenya is maturing, that the institutions are strong enough to hold it. IBC, for example, in the last survey, they got the highest satisfaction rate in the population, 64%, even higher than the judiciary with 63%, and higher than the international community's performance.
You did do better, though.
But one thing I would like to mention is also the very exemplary conduct of the police. We were so happy with the conduct of the police. People were seeing the police as a silent force in the background that gives assurance to them. Whenever they had to intervene, it was measured, and proportionate. And I think overall the IBC did do its very best. Of course, the fact that everything was put online immediately, and it was reported by all the media houses, the counting, gave so much trust and confidence of the citizens. So we have come up with recommendations what to do, for example, on campaign financing, women participation, especially youth participation. That was a problem. So now we have 5 years to work on it. And the EU and others, we really want to make sure that the attention is not completely going to other subjects, and 5 weeks before the next election we wake up and think, oh, maybe we should have done something the last 5 years.
Exactly. Do you think Kenya is under pressure right now? We've just come from a peaceful election. We've had rocky past in our election. 2013 was okay, 2017 was again, and 2022 there was no spot of violence. As European Union, you must be putting a lot of pressure on Kenya to maintain that standard, I guess?
I think I strongly believe that any sort of outside pressure or force is not doing much. So as an international actor, we can support something that is ongoing here, but we cannot impose anything. All of that is going away immediately as soon as the pressure is going away. This is a fundamental law of physics. If you apply force and you remove the force, it will snap back to where it was. So I don't believe in that. I believe in looking at what are the strong points and supporting those. And one of the strong points is civil society here, and also a very vibrant media landscape, a very strong private sector, a great potential in millions of youth, and the very strong women you have here. So this is what we have to bank on, and then make the institutions stronger. And we will start now working on this together with others, together with the government.
Yes.
And the parliament. There are different actors that are needed, but of course we can only support what is being done here in Kenya.
What is your rating in terms of, out of 100%, what is your rating from our election performance in Kenya as European Union? What is your rating?
I would only give a rating now to the population, because I think the Kenyan citizens deserve 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
Yeah.
That's so ambitious on us, meaning that we did better. All right. We talked with the ambassador here, former ambassador of Kenya to South Korea. And in his remark, he said that Kenya stands at a very pivotal point in terms of trade globally. Do you see it as such as well?
I think Kenya is at the moment making huge efforts to expand its trade and investment opportunities. So the new government has made an incredible outreach campaign, and I think what could be done internally is to even further improve the investment climate.
Yes.
So because an investor wants to make sure that what comes in is protected and is yielding in the long run. So I think in terms of the investment climate, a lot still can be done, including really tackling the issue of corruption. I think this is an Achilles heel that we have in many countries. And if you tackle that credibly, there will be so much more confidence of investors. There's also a risk that Kenya will be blacklisted for money laundering. That has a lot of very negative consequences, but first and foremost, it's the reduced credibility of Kenya as an investment destination.
And that is a big concern, if you may say.
Yeah. But before being blacklisted, there are many steps. So normally a country has plenty of opportunities to take measures to avoid a blacklisting. And the EU has also programs to help to avoid countries getting on the blacklist. We are having a program now that is Africa-wide against against money laundering, because we really want to go against transnational organized crime, and that can only be done together globally. But we also support individual countries that want to firm up their policies.
Ambassador, let me ask you this question. Kenya is one of the countries that is fighting global warming. The conference was just, concluded in Egypt, and if you look at what the president is doing right now, he's involved many sectors to plant millions of trees across the country. Do you really think that now this should be a global activity, if at all we need to curb global warming?
Tree planting is excellent, but it's only one of the measures. So a lot has to happen, and I think the first and foremost thing we have to do is change the way we live. And that is very difficult.
And that's why we talked about green energy.
Yeah. So we have to change the way we live, the way we consume, the way we produce. That's why I'm talking about the green transition. Without having a system change across the world, we will not be able to stop climate change. Actually, many scientists say it is irreversible.
Yeah.
And what I'm so happy about is that now it sinks into everybody's mind. Because in the past years, there were so many climate change deniers.
Yeah.
And now there's no way of denying, because people see that in one part of the world, people live in huts that are standing underwater.
Yeah.
Some of the Pacific islands, their families living in water. They have half a meter of water in their huts.
Yeah.
And whole islands need to be abandoned. Here in Kenya, you have an unprecedented drought that is threatening 6 million with hunger and worse. So the denial phase is over. I think everybody now knows that we have to get down to business to fight this. So tree planting is excellent, and we all know that this makes a big difference, but it's only one of the measures.
Thank you. When you talk about elections, let me talk about gender equality, and I know this is also close to your heart. It always gets some kind of steps back. Anytime it goes to Parliament, the two-thirds gender rule is always a very big problem here in Kenya. We are lucky enough that in the last election in 2017, we had 3 governors, female governors. Right now, we have got 7. But that is not enough. Do you really think that the Kenyan government is doing enough to upscale that bit of two-thirds gender rule?
I think the two-thirds gender rule is very good because it's a yardstick.
Yes.
But what needs to be done is to have a promotion of women in politics across all the different levels of government.
But the men folk will say that politics is competitive. It doesn't have to be given to someone?
I think giving it to someone is always an emergency tool. And it is far better if people are directly elected. And you see that more and more women are directly elected and make that jump from being designated to being elected. And I'm just looking at the 7 governors that we have now, female governors. And we as international community, including the EU, want to support them so they give a stellar performance and encourage like that thousands of women or even millions to see that it is possible to succeed as a woman in politics. And many women told us how difficult it was for them to run. They were intimidated, their families were threatened, they were sexually threatened, slur campaigns against them, and the biggest obstacle was the campaign financing. So things have to happen to make it easier for women to run, because now only the most determined and strongest women can get there. And we have to change that by, in the next 5 years, cultivating women and grooming them. For example, the EU started this Miss President program. I will meet Miss President, the winner of this year, this afternoon. And some of the Miss Presidents from a previous edition actually made it into politics. I know one of them sits in Parliament right now as we speak. So it's about what I call creating a goldfish pond of young women and seeing those women that are already in government, including the female CSs, they are an example for women across the country that this is an aspiration.
Right.
And just wanted to share with you, my home country is Germany, and we had a chancellor, head of government for many, many years, 16 years. And there was this boy who asked a female chancellor, Merkel.
Yes.
And this boy asked the father, Daddy, is it possible for men to become chancellor? So, for men to become president?
Yes.
So, I'm just telling you this because one example like that can change around the whole assumption of a society. Look at the very good female presidents in some countries in the world. New Zealand, well, she just withdrew. Finland, you have young, gifted, intelligent, and very dedicated women in politics now. And Kenya can also look beyond its borders for good examples and inspiration.
Ambassador, as we come to a close, you've been going across the country initiating different projects, but one thing that is quite common is the FGM, and you are so close to the hearts of the people practicing that, preaching against FGM. What is the response from the grassroots?
I just yesterday had a meeting with grassroots activists, and they were pleading that we should give more money to the grassroots activists. We gave them some financing to do a film of their activities for the December cutting season. And the way they are working under the worst and adverse conditions is really heroic. And there are mostly women that have undergone cutting themselves and are still suffering the consequences, but also increasingly men who realize that this is something that they don't want for their wives, their children. And what we found is that in the December cutting, for the first time maybe, there has been a very close collaboration between activists and the police. And I think this is thanks to the engagement of the Chief Justice, because she was giving a call to the entire system, and also thanks to the President's announcement coming out publicly that FGM should not be discussed even in the 21st century.
Absolutely.
But this is deeply entrenched in the culture. And there is no quick solution. So what the activists are doing is they're convincing village by village, working with the elders, working with the parents, the communities, and the religious leaders. And I think what counts most is that women themselves who have suffered that go and speak to others. And that the pressure is reduced. But I would like to say that the current drought made things much worse. Because families marry off their girls as a last resort. And I was told that one girl gives 3 cows. So you get 3 cows if you give your child away in marriage. So this could be the difference between survival of a family or starvation. So the drought has made all of this much, much worse, and there's nothing we can do but help the communities to cope with drought.
All right.
So they are not forced to give their child away at 8 or 10 years old.
It's a sad situation in the country, but I'm happy that you, as the European Union, you've come and you've funded the entities and the organizers and the activists to eradicate the cat. But then finally, you're in Mombasa for the prosecutors conference.
Yes,
and you
I
gave
was.
a talk. You spoke so candidly about it. What was so close to your heart, even as we talk about the justice system in Kenya? Briefly, Ambassador.
I'm very proud that the EU is supporting this very ambitious justice sector reform in Kenya. And I think the justice sector is at the heart of governance and the heart of the trust of the citizens in their system. So if there's no access to justice for all citizens, there is just a lack of credibility in the state, and that makes a state very fragile. That's why for us it's so important that you have a very ambitious justice sector reform with the accent on giving access to all. And great strides have been made, but I would like to say this does not only give advantages to the citizens, it also helps business. And I said that very clearly, that if a business, an investor coming in and feels that justice is compromised, that if there's a dispute, you cannot fight for your rights. This is compromising the investment climate and the attractiveness of a country. That's why it's also in the best interest of Kenya in that sector to have a fair and accessible justice system.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. We've been speaking
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for your time, and continue doing what you're doing in the country. We will always be calling you to give us an update and see where we head to as a nation. And I'm glad you talked about justice system, because you know what we're going to talk about next? We have our guest. We want to talk about cases of backlog of cases in our judiciary and how we can include arbitration and mediation in resolving cases.
Can I say one more thing?
Kindly, in 10 seconds.
Because in the justice sector, we are also very big on digitizing the entire sector, including prosecution and all the trials. And that is speeding up things and has already accelerated justice a lot.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right, that has been EU Ambassador to Kenya, Henry Giga, talking to us on matters European Union and where we are as a nation. We're taking a very short break, and when we come back, we want to talk about matters arbitration and mediation in conflict resolution in Kenya. My guests are already in studio. Stick around for that. Good.
Securing pay rises that would ease the country's cost.
And make a life with you, to live together.
Yes, but this isn't the right moment.
Can you see this house? This was the one that burned down. Well, you see, the truth is I don't remember things well.
Nanny, how can you say that you don't remember? Come on.
My dear, so many years have gone by.
What I mean to say is he knows something. Because I don't like to tell anyone, no one, even him, what I'm planning to do with my life.
It would be better if you tell me. It's just this woman never wanted to negotiate with you, boss.
Yes, but everything in life has a price, Matakan.
But I'm not a man who's wishy-washy. I also don't want you to see me as a jerk, because I precisely don't want you to suffer.
Kitwek FM, Kegosin.
It's the DFB Pokals round of 16. Mainz against Bayern.
Musiala, he's dug it out beautifully.
And he's Sieber back in. Alexander Hack. One Bundesliga side has to go out. Mainz have never reached the final. Bayern have been there more than any other side.
And Kimmich! A crisp finish.
Only one side can go through. It's going to be a tough fight.
And welcome back. Still heading on with our discussion here in studio. So you've heard what the EU ambassadors talked about, the justice system in the country. And on that note, without justice, nothing can happen. And that is why I have got two brilliant heads in studio. I have got Siomboa Siokao, who is a lawyer and a certified arbitrator and mediator. I have got Dr. Wilfred A. Mutuba, who is chartered arbitrator and chairman of CIARB Kenya. They want us to talk about matters mediation and arbitration in Kenya as a way of dispute resolution. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Let me start with the lady next to me. We have got a lot of cases still pending in our justice system. And many people still go to courts looking for justice over and over and over again. How expensive is justice in Kenya, to start with?
Let me start by saying that justice delayed is justice denied. For the long time, I think since the Constitution in 2010,
yes,
we've had so many cases whereby we find many people don't get to resolve their issues because of the pending cases that are in the judiciary.
Right.
However, through the Constitution, Article 159 allows us to have alternative dispute resolutions. And through the help of the judiciary, we have now the court-annexed mediation, which we are able right now to assist Kenyans to be able to solve their conflicts for a shorter time.
Right.
Yes.
Has that been, just to come to you, Dr. has that been easily embraced by Kenyans, ADR, in terms of dispute resolution? Has it been embraced largely by Kenyans?
Thank you very much. And first, let me thank you for having me here today. I want to begin by saying that the justice system is an entire ecosystem. It is not just about the courts. There will be no time at all when the courts will be sufficient in resolving our disputes. To answer your question, whether Kenyans have embraced alternative dispute resolution, in fact, if you asked me, Kenyans rely on alternative dispute resolution on a day-to-day basis to resolve their disputes. It is only in exceptional cases that people go to court. In fact, the research we conducted last year at the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, and I have the privilege of being the chairman of the Chartered Institute and serving on the task force that rolled out the court-annexed mediation in the judiciary. It's a task force led by Justice Ochieng. We have been around for about 8 years. What we noticed is that about 92% of disputes in this country are resolved by alternative justice systems. Only about 8% of cases are resolved in court.
92 is a big number.
And that 8% is what you are now saying has created a backlog. Imagine if the justice system, with all its financing from the state, can only carry 8% of our disputes and still be overwhelmed. What is it that the ADR sector is doing? The ADR sector is actually the driver of justice in this country. It is what carries the load, the alternative justice system itself. So what has happened, and what my sister was talking about, is the recognition of the ADR within the formal justice system, so that the courts are now giving impetus, giving access and assisting it. Now, this is a matter which, as my sister has said, is not a question of an option. Kenyans in the Constitution of 2010 commanded the judicial system to promote and actively ensure that ADR is used in resolving disputes.
Right. But even as that is happening, one would argue that the sensitization bit of it is what is lacking, probably.
I believe that the Kenyans have not had enough education, and they've not been enlightened on the benefits of mediation and arbitration. To start with, most people really don't know in mediation it takes a very short time compared to going to court.
Yes.
Because going to court at times it might take 24 months, maybe more. However, if you are mediating an issue or any case in mediation, it takes to around either 66 days or 60 days. And having the benefit to be able to complete a case in a very short time, it means an individual is able to continue on with their lives. Because I believe most cases are more emotional rather than having to head to court, whereby you'll have to take a very long time and it becomes strenuous for an individual as well.
Yes.
So in mediation, it becomes shorter, and also in mediation, things are a bit calm. Unlike when going to court, it becomes a bit hectic because many people are not really comfortable going to court. It's public, but in mediation, it's a private session where you're having your mediator. It becomes a very easy way to resolve your conflict.
But you see, when you talk about mediation, it sometimes becomes a win-win situation. And most of these cases are either domestic, civil cases, that would actually include even the local administrators like the chiefs, we have the elders, and even now the professionals sitting around and mediating about these cases. But if you look at it this way, at what particular point will Kenyans start to appreciate the fact that we have got a mediation as ADR and leave alone the court cases, the court process? Because the backlog of cases will always be there. But until we embrace the aspect of ADR, then we'll always be running to courts, having in mind that that's where justice is. Dr.
I think you're making a very important point.
Right.
And when we started this journey, that was one of the things we looked at. There is an entire system within the judiciary that is tasked, a task force that is tasked with the obligation to go out there, preach the gospel of ADR and mediation particularly, so to speak. And as you say rightfully, that where there is lack of information, because information abhors a vacuum.
Yes.
Some people will fill in information and will speak about the systems. I think the trend we are now seeing for the last 6 years is that incrementally Kenyans are embracing ADR. We may not be doing enough, and that is why some of us are now on this show, to educate Kenyans on the benefits of resolving disputes away from court. Number one, it is fairly cheaper. Number two, it is speedier. Number three, it repairs relations. You have just said about community relationships. Some of these disputes involve family members at a very close level. Business partners want to see that they can go back to their business and work as it was before.
Exactly.
So the idea of resolving dispute in an amicable environment, in an environment that you are comfortable sharing information, is what we are really talking about. Whether we are doing enough to promote the processes of ADR, particularly mediation, is a question that depends on many things, including finances, including the ability for us to market or speak about what we are doing.
Yes.
But we are doing all we can, using every medium, including newspapers. We have We have mediation weeks across the country where we speak to litigants in the morning before we start court to explain to them that you are in court, yes, but we have alternative multi-door processes that you can engage, which will be shorter, cheaper, and which are fully paid for by the government. By the way, the court annexed mediation process is completely free of charge. The mediators are paid by the government.
But perhaps that is one information that many Kenyans are not aware of.
And this is the proper place to say it, because this is the national broadcaster. Kenyans are watching. We will come to the radios. We will go to the chief barazas. We will go to court sessions. And we will tell people in social media and other media that, look, we have alternatives that are cheaper, that are faster, that are effective, that are efficient, where you can sit with your adversary, discuss your problem. Remember, when you go to court, you have to have a legal argument. In a mediation, you don't have to have a legal argument. All you need is a grievance. I can say, my brother, you have offended me. If you apologize, we will move on. In court, you cannot just move away with an apology. Somebody has to pay another one. So when we are crafting this message to people, it is important that we tell them what the benefits are. It is important that we tell them where these processes are. And Kenyans are always very keen to know, how much am I going to spend? I'm already in court. I already have lawyers. Why are you taking me back? That is what we started. When we started this process, those are some of the questions we asked. People are asking, I already have a lawyer. I already have a court case. Why am I being taken to mediation? And you'll be told, look, if you go to mediation, in 15 minutes or 30 minutes, a court case that has been in court for 20 years, 12 years, can be resolved. And you don't have to resolve it in the manner in which judges would resolve cases ordinarily. So again, I agree with you that we must do a bit better. But again, there are constraints, financial constraints. As you know, we operate within a system where there are deficits in budgets. We are doing our best using all the resources available to reach out to people. But when we hear that many Kenyans are still asking questions, 6-7 years after we piloted this program, we still feel there is a serious gap.
Absolutely. Yes. And to see what really happens, Mwinde, is that in terms of mediation, a particular party would feel disadvantaged. You know, somebody will say that, you know, well, we've gone through the process, but I feel like I've not gotten the justice that I really wanted. That is a bit of the disadvantage of mediation, if I may argue, right?
Yes.
So how do you resolve it?
Mediation, for one, it's a personal decision. No one forces you to mediation because
it's now a basis of willing buy, willing sell.
Yes. Mediation is about individuals being willing to sit down and mediate. Because most of the time you find that there are also cases which are not mediatable. So people opt for litigation. So for that reason, in mediation, before people go for a sitting or a session, they have to agree on whether they want to mediate. Yes. Also, I've from Daktari's point, he mentioned about maintaining relationships. I'll give an example of divorce cases. In divorce cases right now, we totally understand that it becomes very messy and it's not a very safe space to have your divorce cases in court. So it is always advisable to mediate your divorce cases because most of the time you'll have maybe the public and the media all over in court. So also nobody wants to air their dirty linen. So in mediation, you're given a space where you can be remorseful, you're seated with your partner, and you're able to solve your disputes in a very amicable way.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Can one refer an active case in court to mediation? If I have an active case and then, you know, I go before a judge and say, Mheshimiwa, I'd love to take my case to mediation. Is that possible?
Absolutely, 100%. That is what is even encouraged under our rules in the court annexed mediation. There is a process of screening the cases. When you file your case, it is screened by the registrars. They look at the case and they see whether it is appropriate for mediation. Now remember, not all disputes are appropriate for mediation. That's come back to the question you've just asked.
Yes, which cases qualify for a mediation?
Let me go there. You know, justice is a variable. Courts do not guarantee you any justice. Justice is a notion. It is something you feel that you have gotten justice. Some people even come out of court believing they have gotten an injustice. You have seen even in election petitions, some people who lost saying that was an unjust decision. But the question is this: when we are resolving disputes, how do we guarantee that the parties will feel that the process was fair.
Exactly.
Not necessarily giving the outcome they give.
Yes.
Now, back to your question, whether you can refer an existing case to mediation. The cases are screened. You can voluntarily say, we want to park our case, try in mediation, then come back if we fail to resolve. But as I said, not all disputes will be referred. Criminal cases, for instance, justice must be served in criminal cases. You cannot just negotiate away a crime because it has a public policy element. If you have murdered somebody, you cannot come and say, I just want to negotiate and come out. Cases of rape, sexual assault, where there is a public interest to show that people are punished for crimes that they have committed. Some of those cases may not fit for mediation. So mediation is not an all-size-fits-it-all. It doesn't fit for every kind of dispute or every kind of judicial matter in court. But commercial cases, for instance, you have a land dispute over sale and purchase of land. Employment cases, for instance, family matrimonial disputes, succession cases. One of the biggest problems in our courts across the country are succession cases. You find somebody died in 1950, his sons have died in 1980, the grandchildren are now old people, still litigating the estate of their grandfather who died in 1950. So they have not even distributed the estate at that level. We are already on the third generation of disputes, and we are now facing 100 people who are disputing over an estate of a man who died in 1950.
Perhaps that takes us back to the order the wheels of justice grind slowly, but ultimately they will come to pass. But then,
absolutely,
you know, there's that cultural bit that can affect mediation in some society. I mean, in some tribes in Kenya, for example. When you take a case of a rape case, for example, some people would sit somewhere under a tree and call wazee 2, 3 there, and they say, you know what, because you did this, we are going to bring 3 goats, and the case is settled. But when you look at it, rape is a grievous offense. How do we now start lifting such cases from mediation to the courts so that all parties aggrieved seem to get justice? Because you've said, Daktari, that justice is a form of notion, it's a feeling that you get. But culturally, where do we draw the line between cultural beliefs and mediation and law and justice?
To begin with, rape cases are very difficult. And in mediation, if at all you have to handle a rape case, it may take forever to mediate it. One, a mediator is only an individual who is there to assist the parties.
Yes.
In a skillful way, to be able for them to come out with a resolution for their matter. In rape cases, most of the time it becomes very difficult to mediate because both parties are not willing to complete the entire session. Yes. And that's why also Daktari has mentioned not all matters are able to be mediated. Rather, people opt for litigation. Yes.
I want to ask you this particular question because a majority of people who feel at some point disadvantaged are the female. They feel that, the society will look down upon us, so we'll have to hide behind the granary. That's what they say, behind the tent. Then we can have a mediation. Do you really think that women should now start coming out more openly and seek for justice, whether it is through mediation or through a court process?
Yes, because there are so many women out here who have been raped. And because of the stigma and maybe they don't want to be judged, they go silent for a long time. And also that also has created people becoming dysfunctional in terms of maybe in their social lives, they're unable maybe to associate with men because the only mentality they have about men is bad. Men are rapists, men are all that. So I really would urge maybe all women out there who've been raped and who are looking for help should come out publicly so that they can get assisted. Yes.
You talked about Article 159, and when it was put there in the Constitution, the whole aspect of having the ADR and as an aspect of conflict resolution, many Kenyans are slowly accepting it. But let it remain at that particular point. So the question I want to ask you, Daktari,
yes,
at what point will the government fully call upon Kenyans to leave the court process and go for mediation? Because we still have backlog of cases running to hundreds of thousands, way back into the 70s and 80s, still active.
Let me say this. Access to justice, Article 48 of the Constitution, underscores that Kenyans must be given an opportunity to access justice in the various forms that justice manifests itself, including by using alternative justice systems and the traditional court system. Now, how is the government going to ensure that happens? We today have a draft national, we have a national ADR policy. The policy is meant to institutionalize the use of ADR at every level of government. One example, and I want to show you, is this. Every statute coming from Parliament now, establishing institutions, is making reference to ADR as a first port of call. You must go to ADR before you go to court. If you look at the English commercial courts now, in England, you will notice that now there is a mandatory mediation process being proposed before you go to court. Locally, we are saying that we want to create a multi-door approach in court. So this Chief Justice will very soon be speaking to this. And the idea is that when you file a case in court, when you reach the registry, you will be asked, have you tried mediation? One of the things you must check out before you file the case.
Right.
And you will be told there is a possibility of filing in mediation before going to court. So the court system will give you a multi-door. The new courthouses being built today have mediation suites as part of the architecture of the court. So you will be asked, okay, fine, you're bringing this case. Would you like to try mediation? We'll give you the mediation suites. We'll give you ready mediators before you come to court. For at least 30 or 60 days, try that before you go to court. So government is doing everything it can and doing the right thing because it is giving the infrastructure. We as institutions are now training mediators. We have over 1,000 qualified mediators in the court system today. When we started, I am mediator number 11. When we started 6 years ago, we were about 40 of us. Today, we have over 1,000.
That's a big number.
In another 2 years, we have more than 3,000. Remember that you don't have to be a lawyer to be a mediator. You can be a mediator. You can train, and it takes 40 hours to train. And you can resolve media disputes, for instance. Disputes between media personalities, between social media influencers, for instance, people like who have contracts with the content producers. That is an area that is fertile for dispute resolution. And I'm saying this because the space has been opened. We have a mediation accreditation committee. You can now be accredited as a mediator so long as you meet the minimum qualification. And therefore, the government is doing everything to make sure that we have mediators, we have a mediation process, and through the judiciary, giving funds to finance these processes. But that is not enough, because still, even with all these interventions, case backlog still persists. And one of the biggest problems is that Kenyans are very litigious, and they believe that everything
must go to court.
And when we have a dispute, it is we meet in court. Not understanding,
that's what they say.
Yes, not understanding that there are other options.
Yes. Okay, where do you see the future of Kenya in terms of conflict resolution? We have got ADRs now, and Dr. says that right now we have got over 1,000, and in the next few years, the number will shoot up. So what is your projection?
My projection is that in the next few years, I hope and believe that Kenyans will embrace alternative dispute resolution, mediation, or arbitration. Because by the end of the day, our economy slows down when we have backlog in court. We have a lot of money which is being withheld in court. And if at all we embrace mediation and arbitration, we'll have our economy moving forward. Yes.
Where is Kenya stand in terms of ADR when you compare with other jurisdictions? Because Kenya sits at a very strategic point in East and Central Africa. Where are we in terms of our justice system and our position in ADR?
I'll say that at least 60% of cases are able to be arbitrated and mediated, and the rest of the 40% should go to court.
Yes.
Because I believe more serious cases should go to court. I really tend to understand that you really don't have to go to court to take an individual to court because someone broke your glasses. does it really make sense?
Yeah.
And the court also urges a lot of people to have at least, for you to go to court first, try and have your matters mediated before you opt to go to court, because the court has a lot of serious issues pending. We have murder cases. You really don't have to wait for a very long time to have your case listened, and maybe you have a case only maybe whereby someone owes you only 10,000 shillings.
Yeah.
That's why right now we have the small claims court. With the small claims court right now, those are cases below 1 million shillings. So instead of going to court and waiting for a very long time, the small claims court is helping individuals to get back their money if someone owes you money. So you can get it maybe in a short period of time, within 3 months, through the court. Yes.
Doctor, your take?
Yes. The future is bright. The landscape of dispute resolution in Kenya is evolving very quickly. For the last 10 years, Kenya is at the forefront. We have one of the few judiciaries in the world that have fully embraced ADR. We have judges who are leading, spearheading the ADR gospel. We have the Chief Justice that is committed to ADR, both the former and the current Chief Justice. We have committed money to paying mediators. The landscape is changing. This is one of the countries on the globe that has fully embraced ADR. And I think to answer your question directly, Kenya is in a good place in terms of developing justice systems. As you know, Kenyans are very, very creative. They are people who are progressive. So we do not fear evolving into the new generation of dispute resolution. So I see a situation where in the next 10 years, every lawyer, at least in this country, will have some idea, training or understanding of ADR. Judges are fully embraced ADR. Many of the judges are also mediators today and arbitrators. So I see a situation where in the next few years, it will not be a question of asking about mediation or ADR. It is the quality of ADR and mediation that we will now be speaking about. Because the infrastructure is in place, the fundamentals are already being put in place, the foundation is strong and going into the future. And we have already started seeing that the backlog has significantly reduced because of this diversion into ADR. And on another day, we will speak about ADR in the criminal justice system.
Absolutely.
Plea bargaining and other forms of ADR that are being employed in that particular space.
But let me ask you, Wakili, when you look at it this way, don't you think that this will now water down the strength of cases that we have if everybody will now start going for ADR, running away from courts? We'll have, they say Kenya is Kenya. And some will tell you, you know what, instead of going to court, we are going to be charged this particular amount, give me this and know how we're going to square this. So we'll have very strong cases, but being swept under the carpet.
I'll actually
Is that a threat that you're facing currently?
To some lawyers, yes, it is a threat. However, we are having advocates who are being trained as mediators as well.
Yes.
We have firms who are having both mediation and arbitration.
Who are certified.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's really a 50-50 situation whereby they want to embrace it and they don't want to embrace it. However, work and money is still there. As we've said, mediation is a personal decision. You can never force parties to go for mediation. Also, the reason as to why probably people should at least embrace mediation, it's because it's cheap. You don't have to look for enormous amounts of money to get a lawyer. It's also not time consuming. So by the end of the day, lawyers win, mediators win. Yes.
Okay, Doctor, we have some funny lawyers outside here. Let me use the word funny in quotes. Are you one of them?
let me say this. Every lawyer who is qualified, licensed to practice law is a person who has the very highest standing because we are regulated. But I want to answer your question by saying this. A new profession is emerging. A profession of mediators, adjudicators, arbitrators, away from the traditional lawyering. It's another revenue stream for lawyers. It's a revenue stream for other people. You know, in this country we need more jobs created. So we are playing our part in creating jobs. But look at the US, for instance, and you asked a very good question. Will it water down the quality of our legal practice and jurisprudence in these areas?
Yeah, because when you talk about anybody can go to, can go there.
Let me say this.
Kenya School of Law will not have students.
Let me tell you this. In the last 10 years, and I've been teaching at the School of Law, the number of students has increased, not reduced. So there is a place for the traditional lawyer. There is also a place for the ADR practitioner. Just the same way we have social media, but we still have a place for newspapers. We still have a place for the TV. Even as we have YouTube, we have a place for the traditional TV.
Absolutely.
So everybody has a space. Even more importantly, looking at the example of the US, hardly 8% of cases get to court. People file cases, but hardly 8% get to trial. People resolve disputes by way of depositions and arguments at that stage. By just looking at what will happen in court, will you succeed or not? So most cases end at settlement. Why is that so? And it makes lawyers still earn money. Lawyers are not cheap. Mediators may be cheap. When you look at your dispute, when you have a dispute, for instance, with your employer, and you have an opportunity to settle it before you get to trial, and get 80-90%, perhaps even 100% of what you would have gotten, ADR has worked. So I want to say that I do not see any threat to any profession or any person. There are many streams of the law. When I started practicing law about 18 years ago, there were very limited courts which you would go to. There were very limited causes of actions that you would pursue in court. Today there is IP. Today there is social media. Today there is data protection, and today there is energy law and oil and gas. So there is always the expansion of the law as societies develop. So I see no problem whatsoever in embracing mediation. In fact, if you ask me, I am now seeing people who have full-time mediators, full-time arbitrators, full-time construction adjudicators, people who have decided that they will not go to court, and yet they are trained to actually resolve disputes. Yes.
And when you look at, the judiciary, the formation and the format of the judiciary, accepting and now embracing ADR, at what particular point do you think that the judiciary should now give full mandate to the mediators and arbitrators to handle their cases without necessarily going to court?
I believe the judiciary has already given the mandate.
Right.
Having the court annexed mediation already gives the mediators who
it's clearly out there.
Yes, who are accredited. And also the judiciary has also played a very big role. We have court annexed mediation in different places. At first it was in Milimani. I believe it was channeled in 2016. And also right now we have the court annexed mediation in different counties. We have one in Kiambu, I believe another one in different places in the country right now. So I believe with the judiciary, it's a safe space for every other person, and they are allowing people to mediate. Yes.
What are some of the challenges generally? Because at the end of the day, you'll have two parties coming at a round table, but what are some of the challenges even in effecting this?
The challenges come in whereby maybe the parties have not yet agreed on whether or not they want to mediate. I, as a mediator, I have the capacity and the skill to enlighten them on why they should embrace mediation. And also, before you start mediating, you always have to ensure that you tell both parties on the importance of mediation, why they should embrace mediation. So through the process of mediation, because I'm not supposed to be involved in the mediation for them to make the decision. I'm only there to assist them and only give them a guidance on how they have to have the process move forward. So with that, maybe the parties come up with a way on how they want to move forward with their case.
Dr.
Yes.
Take it.
Not all that glitters is gold, and not every human endeavor is perfect. We are a work in progress. We cannot say that mediation works completely, but we can say it works most of the times in many situations. When should the judiciary hand over mediation to the people? Remember, one of the paradoxes here is that you have a court system that is saying go elsewhere, and yet we have established it to actually deal with cases. It is really for this simple reason that the court, in the orbit of dispute resolution, the court is at the center, like the sun is in the orbit, so that you have all the other systems running around it. What is critical to understand is that we are dealing with a cultural issue. People trust courts. That is the institution of government that they know resolves disputes. So it was the most convenient place to start this process, because when people come to court and they are told go to mediation, they feel a bit more comfortable, confident. Thirdly, state can only fund some of these processes through formal systems. So if the government is giving money for mediation, it can only come through a system, either the Attorney General's office or the judiciary. So the judiciary took it upon itself. But the truth is that ADR does not belong to the judiciary. The court is playing its role. It may actually be one of the significant roles, but ADR also exists outside the court. The court only helps us to make it cheaper, accessible, gives us the infrastructure. But nothing stops people from conducting private mediations, from conducting private dispute resolution by negotiation and conciliation and other means. But what I have seen is that when these dispute resolution mechanisms go outside the court, they tend to become more expensive, because the court and this government system regulates what can be paid and who pays and how much. And many Kenyans are still struggling. They are indigent. They have spent their money on lawyers. They have filed court cases. They do not have the extra coin to pay a private mediator. So I think in the long term, being a developed country, this is where we want, a developing country, this is where we start. As we develop into a middle income economy and maybe perhaps do better, we may just allow it naturally, organically, generically to go into its own place. Like water, it will find its place.
It will find its place.
Yes.
What are you doing as, it's a stream of lawyers to reach every part of the corner of this country, at least to spread the word? Well, the government will do its part, but, as mediators, as lawyers in the country, what are you doing in your own capacities to pass that message across?
Well, to start with, a vice chair, a Thika Mediation Branch. With the help of Honorable Stella Tambo, she's our patron in Thika Mediation Center. With my team, we were able to launch, that was last year, and we had a few people through the judiciary who came in, and we were able to come up with a bit of solutions to see on how we are going to enlighten and market mediation in Thika and Kiambu. Also, we are able, through maybe those WhatsApp groups and every other platform, Facebook and every other platform, we are able to educate people on mediation. And also through our mediation center, we are able to train people, and through that, at least we are able to reach a few people within our region. Yes.
How can somebody, go through the mediation, the process of, okay, fine, I want this case sorted out of court. So how does one start the process until the case is settled?
First off, we have private mediation, and also we have the judicial, the court annex mediation.
Yes.
So if you're a private mediator, maybe how do people get you? Probably
or somebody can just walk to court and say, you know what, I have a case, and get me one mediator here.
Through the court, they have maybe the accredited people. So through the people who are accredited, they are able to maybe choose one mediator or two. Then maybe the parties who want to mediate are able to pick one, so they can go through the entire mediation process. Yes.
Doctor, do we have geographical influence in terms of a particular region of this country has so many cases that should go through arbitration and mediation compared to other regions?
Yes, let me start by answering your previous question, what we are doing.
Yes.
What we are doing, for instance, at the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, our mandate is to promote ADR. The Chief Justice is our patron. What we have done is to take every opportunity to speak about ADR. We carry out sensitization. We have conferences. There is one coming in July. We are inviting you.
Thank you.
We have an ADR week, a whole week where we discuss, disseminate information to members of the public on ADR. We have one coming in April, and the theme is Africanization of dispute resolution.
Here in Kenya.
Remember, mediation here in Kenya, Nairobi. Remember, mediation is really African. That is the way we resolve disputes. Courts came to us about 130 years ago. We did not have courts. These English courts with wigs and judges pronouncing themselves are new to us. We are still adapting.
In this case, we'll go back to our normal selves, you mean?
Yeah, we are actually back to default settings, which is to resolve disputes by discussion, by having facilitators, and not necessarily an adversarial system.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, what do we do when you want to? Sometimes you can go to court and say, I want my dispute resolved by mediation. They will give you a roster of mediators and you'll choose from them. You can also look for a mediator yourself, a private mediator. Come to a person like me or her, approach us, and then we can resolve the dispute for you. That is permissible. Then the agreement can be registered in court and enforced as a decree of the court. Yes.
Okay, I want to give you your final remarks, because at the end of the day, you know, in 10 years to come, the backlog of cases will, of course, reduce based on, you know, the speed at which the judges will be taking the files and clearing them one by one. So what are we looking at in the next 10 years? Mediation is going to take shape. With 1,000 membership rate now, it means the number is going to go up. So what do we look at? And, you know, when you look at the judiciary now, the Chief Justice is actually now trying to roll out and open many courts across the country.
Yes.
What is your projection in terms of the court cases 10 years from now?
First, I'll want to tell Dr. I'm also a student at CIRB.
Oh, right, good.
I'm actually supposed to be doing my module 1. I think it's maybe in April, March, about. Yeah. My final remark would be, in the next 10 years, I believe that we'll have already been in a very strong position to ensure that we have a stable society whereby people don't have to go to court to solve their disputes. We also, as a country, we need to have emotionally stable human beings, because we believe that going to court, it's really not the easiest thing. Standing there, it's normally not the best feeling. But in mediation or in arbitration, you're comfortable, you're able to air out your grievances, you're able to be listened to, and you're comfortable. So by the end of the day, when you get out of these sessions and you feel like life can move on. Yes.
All right. Dr. Your final remarks?
My final remarks, justice, there's that old adage, justice delayed is justice denied. Everybody is looking for quality justice at a good cost and quickly, expeditious, cost-effective justice. And we must all play our small parts. We are playing our part as the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. The judiciary is playing its part. The government is playing its part. We can all do better. We are urging the media and other Kenyans to also play their part. Invite us in some of these forums. We will also invite you in some of our spaces to highlight what we are doing. Because at the end of the day, without information, people do not know what is happening. Invite us, play our part. Not only political shows and other shows. These are the things that really matter to Kenyans. Because Kenyans
consume politics.
But they do not go home with politics. They have disputes over their land which they live in. They have employment cases. Those are the things that really matter to these people. So let's have a balance of these things and have opportunities where we can talk about what really matters to Kenyans. But I think as far as we are concerned, there is progress, and the progress is positive. Kenyans are embracing change. Kenyans are also embracing alternative justice systems. And I think going forward, we see a brighter future.
Absolutely.
In another 10 years, one thing I know is that we will have a justice system that mirrors the culture of Africans, our Kenyan culture. We will have court systems at work, and according to the Chief Justice in our social transformation program, we hope to see that all cases are resolved within 3 years, whether you come from the High Court or magistracy all the way, so that you don't have to wait for 10, 20 years for your case to be resolved. You have options available. Thank you.
Siokao, one of my directors said that she has a problem. Can you mediate? My director is saying in my ears that he has a problem. Can you mediate?
Yes, I can. I'll give you my number one time.
Martin, you have a mediator here. Please, we know your problem. All right, thank you so much.
Here.
We've been speaking matters justice. We've been talking matters justice, Kenya foreign relations. As far as the viewpoint today is concerned, we thank you so much for being a part of this show. We've been speaking to Siuka Mwende, who is a lawyer and certified arbitrator, and Dr. Wilfred A. Mutubwa, who is a chartered arbitrator and chairman of CIARB Kenya, talking to us here. Please, if you have any case, instead of going to court, arbitrate. We have got brilliant heads here, all right? Now we have them on set. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. Good morning. My name is Victor Lo.
My talent when I was three years old. Then my mother could take me to the crowd and I performed poems. Then during national holidays, I would go there and perform my poems.
Missing you might cause me heart attack and high blood pressure.
I'm going to teach you a very cool craft. And the name of this craft is called an animal in a cage.
Hapa tulipo jamani, tuna huzuni moyoni. Tukitoka jukwani, tunaenda mazishini.
Kameshika kangoma kameshika, kameshika kangoma kameshika, kameshika kangoma kameshika, kameshika.
Puna Moranga Shoro FM Wenyere Nanyuki Shoro FM Nakuru Naivashanya Hururu Shoro FM Motari Mohoro Onanyebo Shoro FM Odhikereria Modhikereria
It's the DFB Pokals round of 16. Against Bayern.
Musiala, he's dug it out beautifully.
And he's seeded back in. Alexander Herk. One Bundesliga side has to go out. Mainz have never reached the final. Bayern have been there more than any other side.
And Kimmich! A crisp finish.
Only one side can go through. It's going to be a tough fight.
Squad, having not played since October on March 6th.
Now, with the current education reforms still currently ongoing in the sector, looking at CBC, the issue of recruitment, training of teachers, deployment of the same, looking at digital learning as well, the loopholes therein and sealing them. This morning, in the next 45 minutes, we'll look at the state of education sector in our country. I'm holding court with Professor Alice Njuguna, who's the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academics, Research and Student Affairs at ZTEC. University. Karibu to the program, Professor.
Thank you, Doreen.
How are you feeling?
Very fine, thank you.
Very fine, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
That's interesting. I just want us to brush this discussion basically from what has been happening, and this is with regards to the A grades. Let's start from that particular point. We're talking about, is it over 984 A's just in one region, 6,400 in the entire country, and from where I sit, I would imagine we should be happy instead of the uproar within it. In fact, we're even having a section of legislators who are saying that we should prop this matter further even in Parliament. From where you sit as an educationist, how do you pick this?
Thank you, Doreen. Matters education always get into my heart.
Oh, yeah?
And almost everyone of us is a parent or a sponsor. So maybe that's why we are having such a great debate. And I always say, if you want to lie with numbers. Because the numbers just don't add up what is going out in the public.
Okay.
But if you read the report from the CS when he was releasing the results, we have 1,146 A's countrywide. They're not in the thousands. A minus, we have 6,407. So in total in the country, we had 7,553 A and A minus. That's a very small number.
So it's even above the 64 that we're even talking about.
That's a small number, considering that we had 876,000 students who sat for KCSE. And this translates to about 0.13% of the total population. Actually, it is down from last year's, which was 0.14%. So if we really looked at the numbers, we would say that, to me, they are not out of proportion, they are not enormous, considering that also the number of KCSE candidates went up. Last year we had 826,000. This year we have 856,000. And who doesn't want their child to get an A?
Let's just be truthful.
Who doesn't want their child to get an A? And the truth be told, we were also given the distribution of the A's across the country, and the A's basically came from the national schools. The bigger number of A's came from the national schools, Doreen. Mangu had 80, I think Alliance High had about 72. That's already 150. And if you look at a school like Mangu, it has children from all over the country. Children who got 430, 440, 420 marks, over 400 marks from all over the country. So transforming them into an A is not that. It's not a big deal, actually, and the teachers are able to do it. As far as the distribution across the country is concerned, I'm a trained teacher.
Yes.
I believe that I teaching at Nyambari High School, and someone teaching at Alliance High School, we both went to Kenyatta University or Egerton University. We went through a B.Ed curriculum. So what the teacher at Alliance can teach, I can teach. So if you give me a child with 380, whether they go to Alliance or they go to Nyambaria or they go to Nyandaro High, as a good teacher, I can actually be able to transform them. So for me, I'm not so much worried about the number of A's. I think the number is a standard. What I would really want to see is a situation where we celebrate success.
Yes.
Because with the kind of onslaught that we have seen this year, it's like you don't deserve to get an A, you got an A. If you don't celebrate the success, we're telling our young people, don't work hard enough. So I would really want a situation where we celebrate success, as much as we also want to look at how to bring up the others. But if we don't demonize the A's, who will want to get them?
And I hear you, and you're really making a very good point there with regards to let's celebrate success. Because truth be told, in whatever capacity, who does not want success? But again, you just said that this was even just a slight drop from what was last year. But again, why would there be such an uproar? What is happening in this education space that would really so much talk about it? And when you juxtapose, you realize it's not even like an increase. In fact, it's a decrease from what was in the previous year. Why is this?
Well, I would say one factor, probably there was a change of regime.
Okay.
So people actually expected something different. People were waiting to see what would the late Professor George Magua, what would he have done? And we had a new CS here. So I think that was expected, that people would be watching to see what would exactly happen. But let's wait and see how the trend goes up in the future.
I hear you.
Yes.
You talked about 686,000 in the concluded KCSE. We're talking about 490,000 who scored D+ and above. Let's flip the coin. away from the top scorers. And sometimes you realize there's less focus or less talk about the students who scored that mark that is on the threshold of the university as it is, or as how our system of education is structured. What more do we need to do from where you sit in regards to just make sure there's inclusivity even for the students?
Now that's where rubber meets the road. Actually, that should be our focus rather than the A's. The A's will get their engineering, their law, their computer science. But these young ones who will not meet the minimum cut for a diploma, because most people will take diploma from C-. That's why we talk about the D+. Where do they go?
Yes.
Are they skilled enough? Did they waste their time in school? I don't think so. The way the education system is currently structured, there is a cake for everybody. There is what we call the Kenya National Qualifications Authority, and they have a framework that allows a child with as low as E to work their way up to a PhD. You start with artisan. With a grade as a D-, you can start from your artisan level. You move to certificate. You move to diploma, you move to degree, and whatever other level that you're actually interested in. And what is lacking, Doreen, is public awareness of what that child can do. I work at Zetech University. I have seen these kids come with C-, and we start them from the TVET level. For example, they'll do a certificate in food and beverage, they'll do a certificate in electrical wiring, and by the time they finish, they have some skills, and they can start working. They can sponsor themselves to certificate level. They can sponsor themselves to diploma. And they're actually able to do that with the proper guidance. The only difference is that it takes you longer to get to your degree if you started from certificate. And many of them, for example, the ones who do certificate in food and beverage, by the time they finish their diploma, they're employed by the big hotels, locally and globally. I know several who are even in Dubai. So they don't even want to do that degree finally because they have the skills. So if we got more public awareness on what is this progression, how does the children join the university? Because we need to tell them, you got a D+, you're not a failure. You are just able, I would say, differently. You didn't get an A like the kid who's going to do engineering. But remember, that engineer cannot work unless they have a technician. You have the story about engineers who cannot even fix a light bulb. Who fixes the light bulb?
The technician.
When the engineer does the drawing, who does the implementation? Who does the rollout? The technician, who probably started with a C-. So we need to actually tell these kids, you're useful, you actually have a career, and you have a place in a society. Yes.
So then, Professor, how do we begin by instilling or creating this awareness? Because you did just touch on that what is also lacking is the awareness that you can do more. There's more beyond this D+ grade. And over time, when you look at even the results release, those of D+ and below, they always top in the list regards to the numbers. There are many compared to the C+ and above. So at what point or how do we start? Because also we realize there's a lot of focus on the top end courses. You just did mention the engineering, the law, and this tendency of if I don't do that, then there's basically nothing I've done with my life. Where do we start from?
That's very right, Doreen. From my experience, and because I've been in the education sector for many years, most of these A's don't even end up in Kenya. They would join Wings to Fly and other programs, and they find themselves outside the country. So those ones, the ones we have had the hulabaloo about them, I have seen the media trying to track where they go. It is the D+ and the C+ who remain with us. A few years ago, maybe in the 80s and the 70s, the village polytechnic was something that was to be looked up to. If your child did not make it to the A levels, for example, they would join the local village polytechnic. You probably know the Sigalagalas and all that, and they would do masonry, they would do plumbing and a lot of other things. And these people are now big shots in the market. What surprises me is that they now don't want their own children to go back and start from that particular level. So the range started beating us when we started seeing the village polytechnic as a place for failures, as a place that is ignored, a place where you dump the kids who don't do it in place. But the government has come up with TVET. And what we need to start having is awareness, both to the students and to the parents, that you can actually build your way up from the TVET. So the media, the educators need to start telling the children, don't always aim to join the degree. I know many people, for example, in my year when I did my KCP. I was in the first 844. I know several of my friends who never went to the university and had passed, and their parents said, no, go and do CPA. CPA to me is at that level. You may call it professional, but it's at a tertiary level, but not at university level. They went and studied, and they're making it in life. Their parents were already aware that sometimes it is better to take this child to a middle level college, and then they join the university a little bit later. So do our parents know? Do our teachers know? And when we start from that particular level, and I'm glad CBC is coming up.
Yes.
Do our teachers know that we don't always have to push them to go to the university? They can start from the bottom. And do you know that, Doreen, some of those people, by the time they graduate with a degree, they have 3 qualifications. I have a certificate, I have a diploma, and I have a degree. When you only have a degree, and the difference could just be 1 year. So the awareness.
And we usually don't see that in that format.
We don't see it that way. The positive acclamation that you can actually make it, even if you don't join the university at the onset, is what we need. All of us as stakeholders.
So then, do you think it was a wrong move to transform some of the polytechnics that were to universities? Take a case in point, even the Kenya Polytechnic, now the Technical University of Kenya, because we are talking about how we can start from that position and continue scaling upwards. And you've really given good examples, even just from your own experience here and there. So was that a good move?
Well, I'd say it was a knee-jerk reaction because I was at that point in time when every Kenyan believed that they needed to get a degree.
Yeah, and actually to just be in a university.
Yes. But if you note, there is a whole reversal. We are putting more money in the TVETs. There is a department in the Ministry of Education specifically concerned with the TVET, and even now the universities themselves have a TVET wing, including ZTech and many other universities, as I know, even the public ones, they have a TVET wing. So we are actually saying, okay, we made that decision, but we need to go back and look at where we are coming from. Yes.
You've also, one of your achievements that I looked at is development of many curriculum from diploma to PhD. In this development of curriculum, how are you making sure, or even from where you sit, that there is proper inclusivity of all? Why I ask this is that over time we have looked at the transition of education from lower classes to primary to secondary to higher learning, and we always look at this with the aim of I want to get to the job market, and not just any job market, sit in an office, a white-collar job. So even in this development of curriculum, in what way is it inclusive to cater for anyone and everyone with the skills that they have?
Thank you, Doreen. If you look at the Singapore model and other models of curriculum development, that's what we adopt. For example, at ZTech University, when you make a curriculum, you ask yourself, what next? Is there progression? If I finish my certificate, would I join the diploma? And are the two related? If I finish my diploma, can I join the degree? And when I join the degree, do I have to start from the beginning and start repeating the courses? So you make the curriculum and stagger it so that the student can move from one level to the other one seamlessly.
All right, moving from one level to the other seamlessly. How has this been working? Because again, you realize there's a lot of concern and complaints in regards to the graduates with CHAN, whether they just did direct entry to degree programs or they moved from certificate to diploma to degree or diploma to degree. There's really a big concern on the kind of graduates that our institutions churn out.
Yeah, I probably have heard a story about half-baked graduates.
Exactly.
And when you make your curriculum, you need to look at the outcomes. In other countries, as we call it competence-based, in other countries they call it outcome-based. And you have to ask yourself, what would this graduate be doing in the market? Because I really don't believe that our graduates are half-baked.
So this is a preserve of this student, or is a preserve of the teachers and lecturer, or it's holistic? Where does this lie?
It is holistic.
It's holistic.
All of us. So when you make your curriculum, you have to look at what we call the 21st century skills.
Okay.
Because what you call half-baked doesn't mean that a kid can't actually do the job they're supposed to do. They probably lack a few things like communication skills, they like media skills, they lack innovation, they like critical thinking. So if you make your curriculum and you infuse some of those skills, you're likely to find a graduate who hits the market running.
Yes. And that's the point and bit that we have been missing, infusing all these skills. So then where do we start from? Because if we don't do this, you again realize, we always keep saying that. Whether it's CBC, because they will still go to higher learning. We'll say, yeah, they did the competency, but they're still not fit for the job market. So where exactly do we start from, Professor? How do we begin to just sort of like make a change and a difference in the system? So then we don't really keep complaining about the same thing 10 years later, 20 years later. Learning doesn't stop just because you keep saying we are half-baked.
I'd look at it from teacher education.
All right.
Teacher education. Who is teaching our students. Which curriculum are they meeting at their schools of education, either in a TTC or in a university? Do they themselves know what they're actually going to roll out? And then, of course, then we need to go now to the classroom and find out who are our students. What are their abilities? Because if you look at subjects, and by the way, and people don't actually know that, for example, in mathematics, we have mathematics alternative A and alternative B.
What is the difference?
That is already meant to take care of students from very difficult environments. Students from very difficult environments are likely to do alternative B because maybe they have interruptions in their study, like the nomads and the likes. Those who do alternative A are likely to end up being the engineers and the likes. That already takes care of the differences in the students, and the teacher is taught to differentiate the two. If I'm teaching alternative A, I will teach the students in this way. If I'm teaching alternative B, I will teach them in this way. So if you started with the teacher being aware and the students being aware, and also the market, because the market needs to realize that we also have a responsibility. When you buy a knife, Doreen, do you use it immediately?
No.
You always have to sharpen it. I mean,
and also just read the manual.
Read the manual, sharpen it. So when you employ me, you also need to understand where is this person coming from, and then you are able to tailor me to your job market. But I can tell you, the students we normally produce from the universities have the skills. If the stakeholders worked together, they would be able to engage them very well in the market.
I'm really finding this is a sharp disconnect. And perhaps I'd want you to elucidate just a bit further for proper understanding and context. Because from an education's perspective, and as an educationist, you say that these graduates or these learners from higher learning, they always are up to par. Their abilities are tick. Their skills are okay. You just did mention a few things here and there, which if twitched and tweaked, they'll then be good to go. But again, you meet the employer on the job market and they would say, they just did give the papers. There's no skill set. There's nothing. That's why sometimes you get some employers who say, I'm giving you a platform. You grow, and then I will pay you later. And then the graduates would say, but I have my papers. I'm good enough. So what is this contrast? Who's fooling who? Or what more or excess or extra do we need to just do so that then we bridge this gap?
Best practice is that when we make curriculum, we don't sit in our small professors' offices. I just say, I want to come up with a legal curriculum or a computer science curriculum. You benchmark with global practices and with professional bodies. For example, if you're making a curriculum for computing, I'll look at the Institute of Engineers. I will look at the Association of Computing Machinery. I'll look at international bodies and see what is actually trending. What are the top ICT skills, for example. And as I make the curriculum, I will call in the industry. It's actually a requirement by the Commission for University Education in our country that before you actually release the curriculum for inspection, you have involved stakeholders. The people in the computer science industry will come and look at my curriculum and tell me, have you put all the skills that are actually required as stakeholders? I will call in employers. I will call in ICT directors, I will call in HR experts, and I will tell them, come have a review at this curriculum. Are these the skills that you are looking for? And they normally give us very useful feedback. And if that is followed throughout, if you actually take a very seriously stakeholder engagement, you come up with a curriculum that is fit for the market. But you also note that things change very rapidly. Like, for example, in the field of computer science, the evolution, obsolescence is very fast. So you also have to keep on reviewing the curriculum to find out what has changed in the market and what do I want to add. I believe that if all these stakeholders come together, that would be a debate of the past.
That's why I really get you when you're saying that this is a holistic approach. It's not just one entity saying that, you know, for you as a learner, make sure you do this, but also for you as a teacher, make sure when you're going for training, you really understand what exactly, you know, this entails. So I really understand when you talked about that. But again, you did mention on abilities and skill set, and this just orients my next question, because again, there's been a proposal that even as learners exit the secondary school and they're moving to higher learning institutions, as opposed to just sticking on the grade that this learner got, how about then we do entry-level exams to ascertain the skill set of this learner, so that if they want to do sociology, then they have sort of like a skill directed towards that. If they want to do psychology, if they want to do engineering, if they want to do law, they want to do journalism. So then you just don't say, because they got a B, let them go do journalism. They got an A, let them go do engineering. Then midway you realize, yes, you got an A, but it's not really what you are skilled to do, even as a person. Is this a good proposal? Should we be thinking in that direction?
Two things, Doreen, I agree with you, that our exams are very terminal, that sometimes you might just, a stroke of luck, you might find yourself in an A. do you now decide I am going to do
just a stroke of luck.
medicine? And of course, there are changes in the curriculum that are now saying it is not longer summative, it is going to be formative assessment. And I also don't think that we need to wait until the student gets an A for us to carry out that assessment, because that would be a little tad too late. The Ministry of Education did introduce Office of Career Services at all universities. And all high schools do career counseling. I believe that it is at this level that we should be trying to move the child towards the subject that they can actually do. By the time they're in Form 2, you should have started seeing, although they're good in math, they're better off in woodwork. Although they're good in math, they probably would do better in home science, or they probably do better in agriculture. So we do that throughout, so that by the time the child is reaching Form 4, they have already almost decided that I can actually, even if I get an A, I'll go into law. I don't have to do medicine. Even if I get an A, I can go into commerce.
So you start this
field.
early enough.
Exactly.
Even at primary level. Even at grade 6, now you're talking about grades and all. You start that at primary level. So it's a good proposal, but the starting point is what we need to look into. So then it's not just after Form 4 and then you realize, let's test you on psychology and see if you're best fit for this. We start as early as enough. What might this take? Because I'm looking at a point where we can really reform the education sector. Some of these things you're talking about, just as you said, if we looked into these things, they will be a thing of the past. How do we start having these conversations based on this proposal, for instance?
I think we're moving in the right direction.
We are?
Especially with the CBC.
Okay.
Because when you say that this kid exceeds expectations in mathematics, or meets expectations in language, you're already starting to see where this child is likely to end up. So we need to embrace change, and as early, before the kid actually reaches the junior secondary, before they do their grade 6 exams, we should already have started seeing where they are headed. And I think the new curriculum is geared towards that.
Okay.
Yes.
So we can laud the new curriculum in that regard.
Yes.
And we'll talk about that momentarily. But also, just heading the crisis management and transition from face-to-face to online learning during COVID-19. And I was telling you earlier how during COVID, we really did experience that sharp divide in our education sector. And we just did see how much there's a lot we need to do as far as digital learning is concerned. Much as you looked into this transition from face-to-face, from where you sit again, Professor, how would you rate where we are as a country as far as education is concerned, this tied with digitization or digital learning altogether?
Okay, Doreen, I would say we've made some milestones, but we have a lot of work to do.
Okay.
Because when COVID came to us, many of us were not even ready. We were still waiting for the free laptop scheme to work. So many kids at primary school, at secondary school, even at the university, did not have devices to be able to move on to digital learning. Some people had never used a video conference application. Majority of us had never really used one.
Zoom was just starting at that point.
Zoom was just starting, and it was basically used for commercial purposes. And it is not something, because we would say it consumed a lot of our bundles. We really need to ask ourselves, where do we start? In the computing curriculum in primary school, the kids should already be prepared to learn online, because they already learn online. And by that, Doreen, digital education, the use of digital media in education did start. I remember in 1973, I remember in 1978, in 1983, radio broadcasts, and basically they were run by KBC. Radio broadcasts were common for education. I remember in class 2,
the radio lessons,
well, there is not digital. That's already digital, right?
Because it wasn't like a one-on-one class.
Yeah, we didn't see the teacher, we listened and we understood and we took notes. Basically what we're having is an advancement of the same. And technology has evolved such that even with your simple phone, so long as it is internet ready, you can actually be able to run a class, you can be able to study. What we need to look at is the government provision of such services to schools that are disadvantaged. Do the kids have access to bandwidth? Is there fiber connectivity in some of the remote schools? And I know there are a lot of efforts that are being done by both NGOs and the government to ensure that those kids get access to the same. Because what I saw was a sudden makeover, trying to make sure that learning continues in many organizations. But for us at ZTech, fortunately, we had already introduced online learning. So it was as simply as converting the few courses that were remaining to have the students learn. But to the truth be told, what happens after COVID? Slowly we start going back to our own original way. So it has to be something that we all agree that a student can learn online. A meeting can be held online. Because the future of the job market is online. I don't remember the last time I walked into a banking hall.
It's all mobile money.
And you know, there's always this fear that online learning would get rid of the teacher, and there is nothing like that. The teacher goes nowhere. The teacher is a curriculum developer, the teacher is the implementer, the teacher is the one who looks at the material, the teacher is basically the one who marks. All you need to is to enrich the teacher and enrich the students so that we can all be able to participate.
Yeah. Plus the online learning, you won't learn by yourself regardless. The teacher definitely will facilitate.
Exactly.
But you did say there's a lot of work. Yes, you said we've made milestones, but still there's a lot we need to do. And it also puts me a bit in a conflict, because when you look at the efforts, you just did touch on the laptop projects, maybe it veered off and we may not touch on it for this particular conversation. But again, just also looking at what this regime is doing. Their first public holiday that it did oversee was dubbed digital economy. It's all about the digitization, space and stage. You've heard and seen the CSICT Eli Dowalo rolling out public Wi-Fi hotspots. In fact, he's doing this almost on a regular basis. We've talked about the digital superhighway. The cabinet did give it a green light, go ahead. Yesterday, the president did chair the first paperless cabinet meeting. So it's all about digitization. Looking at the efforts that even the state is making, but then again, when it comes to the thing itself, that's when you actually realize there's a sharp divide. Where are we missing the mark? Because when you look at the efforts, even from face value, there's really quite a lot that is being done, you could say. But again, you come down to the ground and you realize there's still a lot that we need to be doing. Where are we missing the mark, Professor?
If you want it to work, take it to school.
Take it to school.
There's nothing as frustrating as seeing a 40-year-old scrambling with their tablet looking for the icon. And they can't even start an application.
All right.
Suppose that person was taught computing right from high school. Not computing as we know it, as we imagine it is always programming, how to use the devices. Suppose we introduced it in school. Suppose we made it an effort to say that in every classroom, we'll remove the chalkboard and introduce a smartboard. Suppose we say that every application to school will be done online, and therefore ensure that every school has access to the resources. Suppose we say that some of the examinations at primary level, at secondary level, will be done online. So that by the time this child is hitting the market as an adult, the skills are part of them. Just like language. We know that the language of business in Kenya is either Kiswahili or English. Do we start teaching Kiswahili and English after school?
Definitely not.
We teach it in school and we make it mandatory. So that by the time you leave, it's part of your life. It's in your DNA. So for me, I would take it back to school. I would revisit the issue of the laptops and teacher education as far as IT is concerned, and ensure that we are actually teaching actual competencies, not the theory of computing, but actual use of digital media.
What about these trainings, even to teachers? Because just did mention, it disturbs you when you see a 40-year-old or a 50, the iPad is there and you can't even really get where the icon is. So you want this learner to even learn using the digital platforms, but also are our teachers trained enough to handle such? Where are we in regards to that?
The training is supposed to be continuous, not that one module you did at the university Doreen called Introduction to ICT.
Because I think that's where it is currently, just on the module that a teacher did.
And that is the end of the story. It's supposed to be continuous, and I always say that every unit we do, there should be some IT element. If I am teaching mathematics, I will teach these kids how to key in the functions, mathematical functions on their laptop. Every unit, if you teach communication, let there be a digital element. If you teach sociology, let there be a digital element, so that it is not just a theory unit. It is something that will actually help you to get the competencies in every field that you do. You know that, for example, if you go abroad, there are places where there are no waiters. You order the meals via robot, and there's a screen in front of you. If you can't even find your way, how do you do that? So we really need to ensure that it is something continuous that we train throughout, not one module. Yes.
How do we work then on the issue of affordability? It's also coming out as one of the biggest impediments, I should say. You just did say that sometimes one would imagine, should I be going on this online platform to study X, Y, Z? The cost of bundles could be expensive. So then, much as we're looking at launching public Wi-Fi hotspots, and this is good for business, but even as we try to incorporate the education sector in all of this, how would we look into making the cost of internet affordable, so that even when we look at digital learning, it's actually accessible? Even that child who was down there in Turkana, Marsabit, Samburu.
One of the things that probably as educators we'll be looking at is the tax regime.
All right.
for digital devices or for educational purposes. If you're able to zero rate products that go to places that provide essential services, we believe that we should look at taxation for Wi-Fi for schools. I saw we are now taxing telecommunications and video conferencing. It is something that probably the policymakers and educators need to sit together and ask ourselves, how do we make this affordable? Because this is now becoming an essential service. Doreen, if you're able to provide vaccination free, polio and the likes, for me, I believe that digital skills are almost at that level. That education services that lead towards a better graduate should basically be zero rated.
I hear you.
Yes.
And definitely there's a lot that we need to be talking about. We'll come back to also look into the issue of CBC. But for now, I want us to cross over to Mombasa County, where our very own Kamche Menza is live there. We are looking at the State of the Region address by the Intergovernmental Authority on Development. That is IGAD. Kamche, what more do we know from your end?
Well, good morning to you back in studio, Doreen Aranga. Like you said, we are here in Mombasa, specifically at White Sands, where today the country is hosting leaders from 8 countries that are member states of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, specifically known as IGAD. And this is the 3rd annual address State of the Region by the Executive Secretary, Dr. Wokne-Gebeyehu. It is happening in Mombasa. Like I told you, this is the 3rd one. And should I say funny enough or lucky enough as Kenya, this is the 3rd one we are hosting in the country, and it is happening in Mombasa. There have been 2 others, and this is the 3rd one, and it is happening in Kenya and specifically in Mombasa. So today at around 10, we will be having a State of the Region address by the Executive Secretary of IGAD, that is Dr. Wokne-Gebeyehu. But right now I'm joined by the spokesperson to the Executive Secretary of IGAD. This is Dr. Nur Mohammed. Welcome. Maybe you could start us off by telling us what exactly is this event usually about?
Thank you so much. Actually, the KBC has been covering our events. This is the initiative of the Executive Secretary, the new Executive. Well, he's no longer new, but since he took over, he initiated this very important State of the Union address, which is basically being transparent and accountable to the citizens and the IGAD policy organs. IGAD has 3 policy organs. There's the Committee of Ambassadors, the Council of Ministers, and the Assembly of Heads of States and Government. So essentially what he does is he takes stock of what IGAD has been doing throughout the year in terms of mandate areas, which is peace and security, health, economic integration, and issues around climate, countering terrorism, what the organization is doing in terms of harmonizing member states' policies to respond to these events, and then also lay the reform agenda that he's undertaking for the organization, but with regional policy in mind. And this organization is made up of 8 member states, and so the Assembly of Heads of States comes from all these 8 member states. And the member states, Kenya is a very important member state of IGAD.
Maybe who do we expect here today?
So today we have all the ambassadors from member states who are accredited to IGAD, IGAD staff, the directors of IGAD, and also he's taking the opportunity to launch the Council of Eminent Personalities, 3 from each member state. And the Council of Eminent Personalities basically will act in an advisory role to the Executive Secretary and to IGAD, and linking the organization with the communities. And these are eminent personalities. They come from academia, from conflict resolution, from diplomacy, and they will enrich the work of the organization.
Like you said, there are a number of issues that this particular coming together usually looks to address, issues on security, peace, and all that. Can we talk about the achievements 3 years down the line? What are the achievements that IGAD has so far been able to gain in addressing issues that are affecting countries that are member states?
Thank you so much. So as you know that the region, we face so so many challenges, whether it's climate, whether it is peace and security, health. So let me just start with peace and security. The Ethiopia conflict situation. IGAD was very instrumental in brokering that peace agreement that was signed in Pretoria, and we worked very closely with the leadership of IGAD. So President Kenyatta of Kenya was involved, former president, but even when he was president, he took keen interest and he worked with other leaders. And IGAD worked closely with the African Union to ensure that, a peace agreement, a political agreement is reached. The Ethiopia-South Sudan border issue, that also IGAD ensured that, the two leaders from the two countries meet, and the meeting took place in Nairobi on the sidelines of the IGAD extraordinary summit. South Sudan, the peace agreement, the 20 peace agreement, was actually also shepherded by IGAD, and we are the ones now monitoring to ensure that it's smoothly implemented. The transition in Sudan between the civilian and the military, IGAD is working towards, ensuring that there is a civilian administration in Sudan. So there is that. And then on the issue of climate, IGAD has represented the region at COP26 in Glasgow, at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, to make sure that, the region puts in place measures that mitigate from climate crisis, investment in adaptation, etc. And we have a fully fledged state-of-the-art climate facility based in Ngong in Kenya. And then, of course, COVID, we are the first regional organization to come up with a strategy to deal with the COVID pandemic.
I'm trying to be also careful not to preempt what the Executive Secretary will be talking in his State of the Region address. But you spoke about climate change, and we understand there is a severe drought in most parts of the region. Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, these are parts that are facing severe drought. Has IGAD, or what has been the role of IGAD in trying to help these particular member states?
Thank you. As you know, IGAD was set up in 1986 to deal with the issue of drought and desertification. So our key mandate area was actually the issue of drought and desertification. So we've convened a number of ministerial meetings to ensure that, one, member states address drought and the issue of food insecurity with their own resources, have put up an early warning system and early action system. Number two, we work very closely with our partners to ensure that there is immediate humanitarian response. But we don't want just to deal with humanitarian response. Some of these issues are related to conflict, so we have to ensure that people are not displaced as a result of conflict. We also ensure that there have to be development responses. We make sure that there is investment, sufficient investment in livelihood programs. But by and large, we harmonize member states' policies to ensure that we deal with this climate vagaries.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nur Mohammed. He is the spokesperson to the Executive Secretary of IGAD. And in about how long? In about 27 minutes, the Executive Secretary for IGAD, that is Dr. Woknegebeye, who will be making the State of the Region address here in Mombasa, will be, walking into the conference room. We are right outside the conference room. And of course, there are a number of issues that have been mentioned. We were likely to probably hear most of those issues in that particular address. And KBC will be airing this whole event live. The State of the Region address will be aired on KBC Live from 10. So perhaps to the viewer, just to inform you that you can keep it KBC, of course, to understand basically what is happening and what has been addressed in the 8 countries that are member states for the IGAD. Back to you in studio, Doreen Arange.
Right, and definitely the minute we get that link and that address there, we'll definitely be heading over there to just get bits and pieces of how that will be unfolding. But that has been our very own country.
Will also have to prove they've mastered a minimum level of French. The first time any formal language tests have been required for residency. The proposal also includes measures to encourage amnesty for undocumented migrants working in sectors under pressure, like restaurant workers, hotels and construction. if they've lived in France for a minimum of 3 years and work in an industry experiencing a labour shortage.
Focus to what we were discussing, state of education. And before we go to CBC, Professor, I want you to quickly, as you were touching on the issue of affordability, of connectivity, and I was just saying how this could also be easy and make it easy for that student who's in Turkana, Samburu, Marsabit, those far-flung areas, then what more would we need to do, and what recommendations would you be having moving forward?
Thank you, Doreen. And I think the government already had it in place.
All right.
It needed a little bit of tweaking. The free laptop per child, instead of having every child carry the laptop with them, just have them in the school, so that they can be shared and the child doesn't have to go home with it.
Yeah.
So for me that would work. And also, that is one. Also, as we work towards a local industry, I still believe, Doreen, that our own technical staff are able to come up with our own locally affordable laptops. And that would really help our children be able to access. And also, that many of the phones that are coming in today are internet ready. They can actually be tweaked for educational purposes, so long as we have the right applications and we have the right software and we have trained the right support teams, and that would make it much cheaper. However, there is a danger, because I hear that the cost of power might go up, so we are also hoping that we'll be able to tweak the same to be able to use solar, because we have a lot of sun. Like now in Nairobi, the sun has basically come down.
So we could leverage on that.
Leverage on solar.
So I hear that there's indeed, the plan is in the offing and it's good enough, but ideally also there's a bit of here and there we need to be doing to be sealing the loopholes. And it won't be justice to exit this conversation without talking about CBC. Why? Because you'd realize also a lot in our discussion we've touched on ability, skill base, and this is what CBC is ideally all about. So then, is this indeed what we have been needing all this while in the education sector to make our education as a country what it needs to be?
Thank you, Doreen. You just hit it on the head. That's what we've been needed. And I think the origin of 844 was supposed to be outcome-based. I remember for us...
That was the idea.
That was the idea. But in any other name, Marose by any other name would smell the same. That was the original idea, that the students come out with outcomes that can actually be seen, something tangible. And it is already there in the technical subjects. If those kids who do music in high school would tell you there's very little theory. You have to learn how to play an instrument, you have to compose the skill. That is already outcome-based. That is already competence-based. The kids who do home science would tell you, you have to make an apron, you have to cook a meal, you have to do everything. If you're doing woodwork, you have to come up with a bench. If you're doing electrical sciences, you have to do a connectivity. So it's already there, but it was at a much smaller scale because we'd focus more on the examinations. We focused more on the theory and passing exams, and we didn't really see those kids as that. So CBC came in to ensure that this is actually entrenched in all that we teach at the primary level. If you have a kid in primary and you had the parents complaining, they actually do actual things. I've heard in Japan they actually come up with the phones and watches and the likes. Maybe that's what we need to ask ourselves. Instead of coming up with a carton mannequin, can we come up with a real one? And that's also a factor of Vision 2030, industrialization. Can we actually have these kids make these things in school if we provide the material? I think this is what we need. That will bridge the gap between what you're calling earlier the half-baked. A kid who cannot fix a bulb, a kid who can't even write a memo and they're coming in as a communication specialist, a kid who can't manage a camera, and then they have done a media course, a child who can't even connect a microscope and they're walking into the medical lab. CBC is supposed to bridge that. And I believe from what I have heard with those kids, parents with kids in school, those kids are actually doing something that really brings out what they can do with their hands and their motor skills and their intelligence. Yes.
I'm reading a lot of training. It's good enough you're saying that this is actually what we need, more like the silver bullet in our education sector. But also from what you're saying, I'm reading a lot of training and also emanating from the teacher side. We were talking about the recruitment of 30,000 plus teachers, and this was supposed to go and bridge that gap, particularly when it came to grade 7 learners. And the proposal was to be having one teacher at least in every school. I was just telling you that as of yesterday there are already complaints that yes, schools opened on Monday, and this is particularly for the grade 7 learners, but even as we speak, in some public schools teachers are not yet there. Deployment is really taking place in a slow pace. And so then one would wonder, if this was 6 years to prepare for this that would call the silver bullet in our education sector, where did we miss it? Because now who's really suffering the most? Is that grade 7 learner, for instance? Or if at all you are to borrow teachers from the previous grades to come and bridge this gap, then you're creating a deficit. in where we are borrowing from.
Doreen, you're right. This is where we went wrong. When you start something with education, you're supposed to go through the full cycle. You're supposed to forecast that up to the end, carry out your what-if analysis. So when this child enters grade 1, they will do exams for grade 6 in the year 2022. They will be moving to the next level in the year 2026, up to the university level. I think here we had the right motive, but we started right from the beginning, but we did not look at what would happen next. That's why we had to do the knee-jerk and say, now they're going to remain in the primary schools. So we need to actually now sit down and not wait for 2026 to now say, oh, they finished grade 9. What next? Are they going to remain the same secondary school, the same primary school? Do we have labs and the likes? So I trust that the education policymakers will now sit right now and look at it, and look at the training. Right now, at ZTEC, we have already started the university, training the university lecturers, because those kids will finally find us. But it needs to be a concerted effort so that the next batch, it's a feeder.
But it
the
looks
next
like
batch
this is
waiting
happening
for
mostly in private institutions, because even when you talked about online, I could relate. Just being in the private institution, you realize, even with the advent of COVID, like online learning wasn't really quite disrupted. You just said that even in the institution and being a private institution, that training has already begun, because whether you like it or not, this grade, after grade 9, they'll definitely come to the, actually after grade 9, then 10, 11, 12, they definitely go to higher learning. So then, where does it leave public institutions with all this? Because also, the majority would end up in public institutions.
Darren, I think if there are any lessons we've learned over the last couple of months, when there was a sudden public participation, where do you want the kids to do? I believe that the CS should be able to convene the body that was composed by the president, and now they start looking at the next level. Because you cannot train teachers in 3 weeks. And they are really competent enough. It is something we really need to look at, because I note that it is not only the teachers that we don't have the labs. We don't have the material. The parents are complaining. Some are still looking for schools. So we need to come back and look at it wholesomely, without looking at whether it is public or private, and ask ourselves, where will these children go? Yes.
Because again, also there was another issue of capitation, and you were saying that this is given to public, public schools, and the private institutions are complaining. So then where does this leave us? But then, just as you said, it needs to be holistic, so that then we don't demarcate and say for public could be difficult, or for private is easier, or then we are giving public more and leaving out the private institution. So then training is definitely important. But also, when you look at this new curriculum, there's a lot of involvement even from the parent than the previous curriculum. Look at the CP, look at the the 844, I should say. So different. So even let's talk about training. There's sometimes that idea to focus so much on the teacher training, but the teacher would say in the book, with the help of a parent, where are we leaving the parent as far as training is concerned in this new curriculum, and looking at the holistic education reforms in the country?
To be honest, Doreen, I think we'd left out the training of students fully to the teachers and forgotten that the mother is the first teacher and the father. They're the first teachers. So they probably will not need training, but they will need counseling. They need some mentorship. They need to be involved so that they know that they have a part to play in the education of the learner. And kids are very happy doing homework with dad these days, Doreen. Kids are very happy cooking with mom, who was never available before that. So for me, this will create a society that is more cohesive. So we need to engage the teachers, the parents, right from the time they start bringing their kids to PP1, so that they know that they will have to walk the journey with the students. And I am glad that the CS is talking about the school hours, for example, and saying that learning must end at 3:35 p.m. That gives the time for the child to play and go home early and probably get to interact with the parent. Of course, I understand parents are busy and some of us go home very late, but you'll have to make part, you have to really create time. I believe that the teacher teaches my child arithmetic. It is me to teach my child how to say thank you, how to say excuse me. It is me to give my child room for the practicals. Like if they were taught hygiene in CBC, the following morning they'll be brushing their teeth. I should be there to supervise. The teacher may not necessarily be there. So all of us have to give. There's a sacrifice that we'll have to give if the children of this nation are to be really molded into what we're looking for.
I hear you. So then you're saying this is not really necessarily training as is, but counseling, mentorship, understanding what they need to be doing as a parents, and not feeling like this is a hefty and a heavy burden on them. This needs to be a conversation. Is it happening, even from where you sit as an educationist?
It's happening.
It is?
It is happening. I have seen Even let me just still go the private way. Like us at DTech, we usually have a stakeholders meeting with our parents. And when we started, they made a lot of noise. I don't have to attend a university school meeting. I attended a primary school meeting. And it is already happening. In many other primary schools that I go, they usually call us, tell us to talk to the parents and explain to them. The teacher is not telling you to do the mathematics for the child. They're telling you to enable, provide the resources, provide a conducive environment, and provide the time. It is already happening, but now it needs to be part of the school calendar, that there will be mentorship for the parents. And it's not just the schools, even churches have a role to play. Media has a role to play in educating the parents on how to get involved in their children's education.
I hear you. We have 5 minutes to exit this space, Professor, but I wouldn't want us to do that without talking about what was mentioned by the President. That is collapsing of HELB and TVET funding into one fund. And you realize also that we had gotten to a point whereby even students in private institutions were being funded by this HELB loan. As an educator, someone from the academic space or scope, how are you looking at this idea that is being mulled by the state?
Doreen, I look at international best practices because Kenya is quite developed, and I don't believe we are a least developed nation. We are a developing nation, just like any other country, because everybody is growing. I just go by one mantra: money should follow the child.
Money should follow the child.
Money should follow the child.
But look at what the President said, so that we can be able to actually see who deserves it. Because you see, the whole idea was that we just fund, much as even you'll go to public institution, but maybe your parent is capable. Then you realize you'll be funding everyone with the amount that is given for capitation, and there's this child who's very needy, whom we could have actually otherwise directed the whole funding. So then it's good, money follows the child. But how do we draw the line?
The child who needs the money. Money should follow the child, because you've had a debate, and I am also a true believer in the same. Because like now, I have seen the fee structure for national schools, 53,000 per year, and a parent can pay comfortably. Why is it that now when they go to the university, they cannot pay 40,000? Does that mean that the child is now out of the league? So we need to find a mechanism of where we actually fund the children who need the money.
So this collapsing is good?
This collapsing is good. Okay. But we also need to look at the disciplines that we need to fund, where we don't have enough staffing, so that we are actually looking at the national goals, the national priorities, so that we actually put money where it is actually going to be needed. So I am a strong believer that if a parent can pay, let them pay.
Good. So I'm seeing you agreeing with the present proposal.
Yes.
That if indeed, because the whole idea was that if a parent can pay, let them pay. So then we don't say that we just fund public institutions, but then there's a child X from family X, much as in a public institution, but they can be well funded while learning there. So then also, as we conclude, Professor, how do we move from the mentality of just having or being in an education system, whether the former or what is CBC, with the idea of in this learning institution with the whole mindset of getting a job, being employed? How do we move our mental capacity from that state?
I talked earlier about 21st century skills, and I think that's what they're meant to do, to prepare the child to work. You know, when you say work, people think it is manual. We prepare them to work. As self-employed, you work. As employed, you also work. So we need to prepare our children through entrepreneurship skills and hands-on skills, and show them that when they leave the job market, the university, they will not be going to look for jobs. They will be solution providers. They are going out there to find out exactly what's happening. And for us, the way we treat it, we look at it from the internship level. When the student is still at the university, we take them to the industry and we tell them, go and find out the problems that are facing KBC, for example, and give us a solution. So that by the time that child is leaving the university, the student is leaving the university, they know what they can actually be able to create a niche for themselves. So it's a mindset change that we need to take. Yes.
This mindset change, where does it need to be? Where does it need to start from? As early as toddlers, primary school?
I would say that early. Let me tell you, the 3-year-old goes to the mom, with the mom to the shop. And when the mom is selling, they sell with them. What does that tell you? That kid can already start seeing entrepreneurship skills. A 5-year-old goes with their father to who is a medic, and sees how the parent is treating the patient and how they are reacting and stuff like that. Already, this kid knows that you can actually create something for themselves. So you don't keep on telling them, so many vijana mwisho wa kusoma mtapata kazi nzuri sana. Yes, you can be the one to create that job. So it starts very early at the inception. You see what the Chinese and the Indians do? You start going to the shop with your mother, and they start preparing you to run the family business. So that's that's the culture we need to do. And we used to have it. The apprenticeship system in the old African society. If your father was dealing with herbs and medicine and stuff like that, he would carry you along with him. You carry the stool for him and you learn how to do that. It is something we have to go back to and start preparing our kids to be solution providers rather than waiting and giving their CVs door to door.
Yeah.
Yes.
And just to talk about the Chinese and Indians, this just reminds me that sometimes you'd even realize even if you're a doctor, you must be handling some family business somehow, somewhere.
Exactly.
Because you've learned about it over time.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your time. Definitely appreciate your valuable inputs into the state of education in the country and just what more we need to be doing to at least make sure we get there. We stop complaining and talking about the challenges, but we actually do get there.
Yes.
Definitely appreciate it.
Yes.
I have been speaking to Professor Alice Njuguna, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academics Research and Student Affairs, Zetech University. Of course, what has formed center of our conversation is looking at the state of education in the country and just what we can do to seal and break the loopholes that still exist. Also, it's a good place for me to remind you of what we are following up for you. That is the state of the region address by IGAD, and of course at 10 when we get that link from the secretary, that is Dr. Wagner, the address, we shall definitely be heading over there to just give you bits and pieces of how that will be unfolding. And also what we know is that leaders from these 8 member countries are present. The representative ambassadors are equally present in Mombasa County. That is White Sands Hotel in Mombasa where this event is taking place. Good place to end this conversation. And ultimately, good morning, Kenya. I'm Doreen Arange Okello on behalf of the entire team. Asante sana. Till tomorrow, good morning.
And low salaries. For today's Focus Report, Clovis.
Hii ni Mitikasi leo, makala kutoka BBC. Yaliomo, tunapigia kurunzi upatikanaji wa chakula mwafaka kwa Waafrika wote licha ya changamoto za mabadiliko ya hewa. Baadaye Nigeria yaongeza muda wa kubadilisha sarafu za zamani na kutumia noti mpya. Tutakueleza kiini cha hatua hii na athari zake. Kisha Ghana inatarajiwa kuongeza viwango vya riba kwa mara nyingine tena ili kudhibiti mfumuko wa bei. Moja kwa moja kutoka Nairobi, Kenya. Twende kazi. So dakta, karibu katika habari za biashara zinazokuhusu, uchambuzi wa kina na mahojiano. Mimi ni Peter Mwangangi. Benki Kuu ya Nigeria imeongeza muda wa kubadilisha sarafu ya zamani ili kupata noti mpya. Katika taarifa iliyotolewa Jumapili, benki hiyo imeongezea muda huo kwa siku 10, kumaanisha kuwa raia wa Nigeria sasa watakuwa na hadi Februari tarehe 10 kubadilisha noti za naira za 1000, 500 na 200. Benki Kuu ya Nigeria ilianza kutoa noti mpya mwezi uliopita, ilhali watu wengi wamelalama kuwa hawawezi kuzipata katika benki au mashine za ATM. Gavana wa benki hiyo Godwin Mfiele amesema nyongeza hiyo ya muda itatoa nafasi kwa watu walioko vijijini kubadilisha noti za zamani. Licha ya kuwa mzalishaji mkubwa wa mafuta, watu 8 kati ya 10 nchini Nigeria watu 4 kati ya 10 nchini Nigeria wanaishi katika umaskini na wamekosa